The first cry came before the children were even born. Not from Ilara, not from the court, from the wolves. Every royal wolf inside the throne hall suddenly threw back its head and howled toward the ceiling, as though something ancient had entered the kingdom. Nobles rose from their seats in alarm. Silver goblets shattered against the marble floor. Even the war beasts chained beside the throne began trembling hard enough to rattle iron. And at the center of it all stood a pregnant Omega in silver chains. Ilara Vale did not look dangerous. That was the cruelest part. Her dark hair hung loose around her shoulders, tangled from the guards dragging her through the snow-covered palace corridors. Blood stained the hem of her pale gown, where the chains had cut against her ankles. One hand remained protectively curved over the swell of her stomach, as if that alone could shield the children inside her from the hatred filling the throne room. Above her, carved from black stone and winter pride, the throne of House Vaelric towered beneath crimson banners, and seated upon it, Alpha King Ronan Vaelric stared at her like a man watching his own execution. Outside the palace walls, bells rang through the frozen city of Verhold. The blood eclipse had begun. Red moonlight spilled through the towering windows and painted the court in shades of dying fire. Lord Meryn stepped forward first. The old council lord moved with calm precision, his silver-trimmed robes brushing across the marble floor as whispers spread among the nobles behind him. "She bears the mark," one woman hissed. "The shadow curse. The children are unnatural." Ilara heard every word. She had heard versions of them her entire life. But never like this. Never while carrying the king's heirs. Meryn raised one thin hand toward the throne. "Your Majesty," he said carefully, "the council asks only for the protection of the realm." Ronan did not answer immediately. His golden eyes remained locked on Ilara. There had been a time not long ago when those eyes softened, whenever they found her in a crowded room. A dangerous time. A foolish time. Now, the king looked hollowed by something far worse than anger. Fear. "Ilara Vale," Meryn continued, turning toward her. "Daughter of no recognized bloodline, bearer of the forbidden crescent mark. You stand accused of concealing shadow corruption within the royal succession." A ripple moved through the court. Ilara slowly lifted her chin. "And my children stand accused before they have even drawn breath?" Her voice did not shake. That unsettled them, more than tears would have. Meryn's expression hardened almost imperceptibly. "The kingdom remembers what happened the last time shadow heirs were born." Ilara's fingers tightened against her stomach. No, the kingdom remembered lies. But lies repeated across 500 winters became law. She knew the old stories. Every servant did. The shadow bloodline had once ruled the northern territories before the rise of House Vaelric. They were described as monsters in surviving records, wolves born beneath eclipsed moons, wielders of forbidden night magic, capable of bending beasts and swallowing entire battlefields in darkness. Children were taught that the last Shadow Queen tried to destroy the world. Children were never taught that House Vaelric built their throne atop her grave. The great hall doors suddenly slammed open. A freezing wind swept through the chamber. Priestesses entered, carrying bowls filled with glowing silver ash. The court fell silent instantly. Ilara's heartbeat stumbled. Moon judgment. No. Ronan rose from the throne at last. The movement alone sent fear through the room. He was enormous beneath the black ceremonial armor of the northern kings, broad-shouldered and terrifyingly still, his dark hair brushing the collar of his wolf fur cloak. The air itself changed around him. Predatory. Ancien. Deadly. Yet Ilara noticed something no one else did. Bine. The king's hand tightened briefly against the edge of the throne as though something beneath his skin clawed to get out. His wolf was weakening again. She could feel it, through the mate bond. Even now, especially now, Meryn bowed toward him. "Your Majesty, if the Omega is innocent, the Moonrite will prove it." Ronan's jaw flexed. The mate bond between him and Ilara throbbed violently beneath her ribs. It wanted him near her, wanted him beside her, wanted him protecting their unborn children. But the court was watching. The rival alphas were watching. And worst of all, the council already knew the truth about his dying wolf. Ilara saw it then. The trap had already closed around him. If Ronan defended her publicly, the council would expose his weakness to the northern packs. The throne would fracture. War would follow before winter ended. And if he condemned her, he might keep the crown, at the cost of her. The priestesses approached. Silver ash glowed inside their bowls like crushed moonlight. Every instinct inside Ilara screamed. The twins shifted violently within her womb. Not afraid. Angry. One of the priestesses reached for Ilara's face. Ronan moved instantly. The growl that tore from his chest shook the hall hard enough to crack stone beneath the throne. Several nobles recoiled in terror. Even my own ballot. For one dangerous moment, Ilara thought the king would destroy everyone in the room. Ronan's eyes burned molten gold as his wolf pushed close to the surface. Mine. The words slammed through the mate bond so powerfully Ilara nearly gasped. Mine. Protect her. But then, Ronan looked toward the gathered nobles, toward the council, toward the kingdom balanced on the edge of rebellion. And slowly, he stepped back. Ilara felt her heart break before he even spoke. The priestess pressed silver ash against the black crescent mark beneath Ilara's collarbone. Agony exploded through her body. She dropped to one knee as pain ripped beneath her skin like molten iron. The twins lashed violently inside her womb. The candles in the throne room flickered, then went out. On a B1. Darkness swallowed the court. Gasps erupted everywhere. The silver chains around Ilara's wrists began to smoke. Cracks spread across the marble floor beneath her knees. And somewhere deep beneath the palace, something ancient woke up. The wolves started howling again. Not in rage this time. In submission. The red eclipse light pouring through the windows suddenly bent toward Ilara like blood flowing toward a wound. The priestesses stumbled backward in horror. She's awakening it, one whispered. No, another breathed. That power died centuries ago. Ilara could barely breathe. Black frost crawled slowly across her skin. The mark beneath her collarbone burned brighter and brighter, until the entire throne hall glowed silver black around her kneeling body. And then, every wolf in the room bowed. Royal guards, war beasts. Even the king's own monstrous shadow wolf pushed against Ronan's skin, desperate to kneel before her. Panic exploded through the court. She's cursed. Kill her now. The prophecy. Meron spun toward the throne. Your Majesty. Ronan stood frozen, his eyes locked on Ilara. Not with hatred, not with fear, with devastation. Because he finally understood what she truly was, and because he knew exactly what the council would force him to do next. Ilara slowly lifted her head. Their eyes met across the ruined throne hall, and softly, almost pleadingly, she whispered through the mate bond, "Please, don't let them take our children." Ronan closed his eyes, just for one heartbeat. When he opened them again, the king had returned, cold, merciless, trapped. The court waited. The council waited. The kingdom waited. And beneath the blood eclipse, Alpha King Ronan Vaelric looked at his pregnant mate and spoke the words that shattered both their souls. "I reject the child in your womb." The mate bond screamed. Ilara felt it tear through her chest like claws ripping flesh from bone. Tears burned her eyes instantly, but she refused to cry before them. Not here. Not while they watched like starving wolves. Ronan's voice grew rougher, harsher, as though each word poisoned him. "I reject you as my mate." The throne hall exploded into chaos, but Ilara heard none of it. Pain drowned everything. The twins suddenly went silent inside her womb. The silver chains snapped apart, and from somewhere far beneath the frozen kingdom, a deep ancient growl answered the rejection. Not from the palace, not from the court, from the earth itself. The blood eclipse darkened completely, and every candle in Vaerhold went out. Darkness swallowed Vaerhold for 13 long heartbeats after the rejection. No fire burned, no torch survived. Even the sacred moon crystals hanging above the throne hall dimmed into lifeless stone, as though the kingdom itself had stopped breathing. And in that unnatural darkness, everyone heard it. A second heartbeat. Then a third. Not human. Not wolf. Something older. Something buried. The sound came from inside Alara. When the lights finally returned, the entire throne hall had changed. Black frost spread across the marble floor beneath her bare feet, crawling outward like veins beneath ice. The silver chains that once bound her wrists had melted into smoking liquid metal, and standing at the center of the ruined court, one trembling hand pressed against her stomach, Alara looked less like a frightened Omega and more like the beginning of a prophecy no one wanted fulfilled. No one moved toward her. Not the guards. Not the priestesses. Not even the nobles who moments earlier demanded her death. Because the wolves still knelt. Hundreds of them. Royal war beasts lowered their massive heads to the floor. Elite alpha guards struggled visibly against instincts, forcing submission through their bond with their wolves. Several nobles had collapsed entirely, clutching their chests as panic spread through the mate-linked hierarchy of the northern packs. Only Ronan remained standing, but barely. His breathing had turned uneven, sharp with pain as his wolf raged violently beneath his skin. Mine. The word tore through the broken mate bond again. Mine. The rejection should have severed everything completely. Instead, it had damaged the bond without destroying it. And that terrified Ronan more than anything else. Because impossible bonds belong to forbidden bloodlines, Lord Merrin recovered first. "Seize her!" he barked. No one obeyed. The guards exchanged horrified glances. One finally stepped forward, spear trembling in his hands. The moment he touched Alara's shoulder, his wolf screamed. The guard collapsed instantly, convulsing against the marble floor as black veins spread briefly beneath his skin before vanishing again. Panic exploded through the court. She infected him. The curse spreads through contact. Kill her before. Enough. Ronan's roar shook the hall hard enough to rattle the stained glass windows. Silence crashed down immediately. The Alpha King descended from the throne slowly, every movement rigid with control. His golden eyes never left Alara as he approached. Up close, she could finally see how exhausted he truly looked. The rejection had wounded him too. Not politically, physically. The broken mate bond carved invisible damage through both their wolves. Yet despite the agony twisting through her chest, despite the humiliation and betrayal still bleeding fresh between them, Alara noticed the slight tremor in Ronan's hands. He had not wanted to reject her, but he had done it anyway. That hurt worse. Ronan stopped only inches away from her. The court watched in frozen silence. Alara forced herself to meet his eyes. "How much of it was real?" she whispered. His jaw tightened. "All of it." The answer nearly destroyed her. Because she believed him. That was the cruelest thing about Ronan Vailric. He never lied gently. Even now, even after condemning her, his wolf pushed desperately toward her through the fractured bond, full of panic and possessive fury. But the man himself remained trapped behind the iron cage of his crown. Lord Merrin stepped closer carefully. "Your Majesty, she cannot remain inside the capital." The council members immediately began speaking over one another. "The Pax will revolt." The eclipse itself answered her. "She carries shadow heirs." "Then cut them from her," one noblewoman hissed. Ronan moved so fast no one saw him draw his blade. Steel flashed silver beneath the eclipse light. The noblewoman's throat opened before she could scream. Blood splattered across the council steps. The throne hall went deathly still. Ronan stood over the corpse, breathing hard, sword dripping crimson across the black marble floor. "Speak of my children that way again," he said quietly, "and I will feed what remains of you to my wolves." Fear rolled through the court instantly. Even Merron stepped back. But Alara noticed something important. Ronan had said my children, not cursed heirs, not monsters. His children. The realization cut through her pain like fragile warmth. And that frightened her too, because hope inside a collapsing heart was a dangerous thing. Merron regained composure first. "Then exile her." The word struck the room like falling ice. Several nobles immediately nodded. "Yes, beyond Frostvine Pass." If she survives, the moon has judged her innocent. And if she dies, the council loses nothing. Ilara heard the unspoken truth easily. Ronan heard it too. His wolf nearly surged free again, but the council had trapped him perfectly. If he openly protected Ilara now, the northern pacts would interpret it as proof that the crown had fallen under shadow corruption. Rival alphas already waited for weakness. Civil war would tear through the kingdom before the twins were born. Maron knew exactly which choice would destroy Ronan slowly instead of immediately. That made it the safer political option. Ronan stared at Ilara for a very long time, then finally said, "Prepare horses." The words shattered something inside her more completely than the rejection itself, not because she believed he hated her, but because he still chose the throne first, even now, especially now. The storm reached Verhold before midnight. Snow hammered the palace towers beneath blood-red skies, while servants whispered prayers against shadow spirits in the lower halls. Ilara was given no queen's escort, no royal carriage, no ceremony, only a torn winter cloak and an exhausted gray horse barely fit for the mountain crossing ahead. 2 guards waited beside the outer gates. Neither would meet her eyes. The city had already heard rumors. Windows closed as she passed. Mothers pulled children indoors. Some people made protective signs against evil. Others simply looked afraid. But not everyone turned away. As Ilara crossed the lower courtyard, an old kitchen servant stepped from the shadows and silently pressed a small bundle into her hands. Bread, dried meat, a tiny knitted blanket. "For the little ones," the woman whispered tearfully. Ilara almost broke then, not from fear, from kindness, because cruelty was expected. Compassion hurt far more once you realized how starved you were for it. "Thank you," she whispered. The servant bowed her head quickly and disappeared before the guards could stop her. Snow swirled harder around the gates. One of the guards shifted nervously. "We should leave before the pass freezes completely." Ilara mounted the horse slowly, pain tightening through her stomach. The twins had become strangely quiet since the rejection. Too quiet. Fear crept coldly through her chest. Please, still be alive." As the gates creaked open, she looked back one final time toward the palace, towering above Verhold. And there, high, in the northern tower, Ronan stood alone beneath the storm, watching her leave. Even at that distance, she could feel him through the damaged mate bond. Vage, despair, protectiveness, and underneath it all, terror. Not of her, of what would happen to her once she disappeared beyond his reach. Their eyes met across the snowfall. For one dangerous moment, Ilara thought he might stop everything, thought he might descend from that tower, tear apart the council and choose her openly before the kingdom. Instead, he stayed where he was, a king trapped inside his own crown. Ilara turned away first. The gates closed behind her with a sound like the ending of a life. Frostvein Pass was where unwanted things went to die. The mountains rose like black teeth against the eclipse sky, jagged and merciless beneath endless storms. Snow buried old battlefields beneath white silence. Travelers vanished there every winter. Entire packs avoided the region after sunset, because something lived beneath the ice. Ilara felt it watching her almost immediately. The farther she rode from Verhold, the stranger the world became. Wolves appeared silently atop distant ridges, enormous pale creatures with glowing eyes that never attacked. The storm changed direction around her, and several times she could have sworn shadows moved beneath the snow itself. The guards escorting her grew increasingly nervous. "She shouldn't survive this," one muttered. "Maybe that's the point," the other answered. Ilara pretended not to hear. Her body ached constantly now. The twins shifted restlessly beneath her ribs, and somewhere deep inside her, the sleeping thing beneath the black crescent mark continued waking. By the second night, the storm became violent enough to blind the horses. The group stopped beside the ruins of an abandoned watchtower, half buried in snow. The guards refused to enter with her. They left supplies near the doorway and retreated outside, unwilling to share enclosed space with a woman the kingdom now feared. Ilara, sat alone beside the dying fire, wrapping trembling fingers around her stomach. "I'm trying," she whispered softly to the twins. Pain tightened through her abdomen suddenly. Sharp. Wrong. Her breath caught. No, not yet. The babies weren't due for weeks. Another pain hit harder this time. Outside the tower, wolves began howling. Not ordinary wolves. Too deep. Too many. The storm outside shifted unnaturally fast. Snow slammed violently against the ruined stone walls as darkness swallowed the mountains entirely. Then, the horse outside screamed. One guard shouted. The other started praying. Ilara struggled painfully to her feet and moved toward the broken doorway, and froze. Something massive moved beyond the storm. Not visible fully. Only glimpses. Glowing silver eyes. Towering shadows beneath swirling snow. The guards backed away in terror. "What in the gods' names?" The mountain answered with a growl so deep the stone beneath Ilara's feet trembled. The twins kicked violently inside her womb. Then both babies suddenly howled. Not cried. Howled. Every wolf outside immediately fell silent. And far away inside, Veerhold Palace, Alpha King Ronan collapsed to one knee as the broken mate bond exploded with pain. Because at that exact moment, Ilara went into labor beneath the blood eclipse. Ronan felt the first contraction before Ilara screamed. The pain ripped through the fractured mate bond like claws tearing open his chest. One moment, he stood inside the northern war chamber listening to council reports about unrest among the eastern packs. The next, his knees hit the stone floor hard enough to crack it beneath him. The generals froze. Black veins flashed briefly beneath the king's throat as his wolf surged violently forward. "Ilara," Ronan breathed. Every instinct inside him ignited at once. Protect her. Finhia. Kill anyone near her. The bond burned so fiercely he could barely see. Snow howled against the palace windows, while the blood eclipse stained the world outside a deep crimson black. Something was wrong. Not political wrong. Not prophecy wrong. Primal wrong. The twins were coming, and they were coming far too early. Lord Marin stepped into the chamber only moments later, robes dark with snowmelt. "Your Majesty, the northern scouts report unusual wolf movement near Frostvane Pass." Ronan slowly rose to his feet. The room temperature had dropped sharply around him. Frost spread across the edges of the war table beneath his fingers. What kind of movement? Marin hesitated. That alone was enough to sharpen every predatory instinct Ronan possessed. Entire packs abandoning territory, the council lord admitted carefully. The mountain wolves appear to be gathering. Ronan's golden eyes lifted slowly. Gathering for what? Before Marin could answer, a howl shattered across the kingdom. Every wolf in Veerhold answered instantly. Not in aggression. Submission. Ronan felt the sound in his bones, in his blood, in the ancient dying thing inside his wolf that suddenly woke in terror. The Shadow Heirs are being born. The realization struck him like a blade, and for the first time in years, the Alpha King forgot his throne entirely. "Prepare my horse." Marin stepped forward immediately. "Your Majesty, you cannot leave the capital tonight." Ronan looked at him. The council lord took one involuntary step backward, because the king no longer looked merely angry. He looked feral. "The packs are already unstable," Marin pressed carefully. "If you abandon the capital during the eclipse, rival alphas may seize. My children are dying in the mountains." Silence crashed through the chamber. No one moved. No one breathed. Because Ronan had never publicly acknowledged the twins before. Now he stood before his generals and council with murder in his eyes, and blood-dark fury pouring through the bond. Marin lowered his voice. "If those children truly are Shadow Heirs, bringing them back may destroy everything House Veilric has built." Ronan moved so fast, the old council lord slammed violently against the stone wall before anyone reacted. The king's hand closed around Marin's throat, not fully shifted, not fully human either. Dark claws pressed against the council lord's skin. "You mistake me for my ancestors," Ronan said softly. "I am done sacrificing what is mine to protect cowards." The room trembled. His wolf pushed close to the surface, enormous and furious beneath human skin. For one dangerous second, the generals looked genuinely afraid their king might transform right there in the war chamber. Then Ronan released Meron abruptly. "Lock the gates," he ordered coldly. "If any council member attempts to leave Verhold before my return, execute them." And without another word, the Alpha King disappeared into the storm. Ilara thought she was dying. Pain crashed through her body in relentless waves, while snow hammered the ruined watchtower hard enough to shake loose ancient stones from the ceiling. The fire had gone out. The guards were gone. She didn't know whether they fled or were taken. Outside, enormous shadows circled through the blizzard. Watching, waiting. Every contraction felt wrong, too sharp, too violent, too powerful for human birth alone. The twins were fighting something, or becoming something. Ilara knelt against the cold stone floor, breath shaking uncontrollably as blood stained the hem of her gown. "No, no, no," she whispered desperately. "Please, wait." Another wave hit. This time she screamed. The sound echoed unnaturally through the mountains. Outside the tower, every wolf immediately answered. The howls rolled across Frostvein Pass like thunder beneath the blood eclipse, and then the black crescent mark beneath Ilara's ribs burst open with silver light. Agony exploded through her. The tower walls cracked violently. Ancient symbols began appearing across the stone floor beneath her body, glowing faintly beneath layers of frost and dust. Ilara stared down in horror. Runes, thousands of years old, waiting beneath the mountain, waiting for her. The storm outside suddenly stopped. Not weakened. Stopped. Silence swallowed the mountain completely. Then heavy footsteps approached the tower entrance. Slow, massive, predatory. Ilara struggled backward instinctively as a shape emerged from the darkness beyond the doorway. A wolf, but not truly a wolf. It was enormous, larger than any war beast in the royal kennels, with black fur that seemed woven from shadow itself. Silver scars crossed its body like cracks in moonlight. Ancient golden eyes fixed silently on Ilara. The creature bowed its head, not to attack, to submit. Ilara's breath caught. Impossible. More shapes appeared behind it. Dozens. Ancient wolves emerged from the storm one by one, surrounding the ruined tower in complete silence. The mountain pack. The forgotten wolves of the old bloodline. Every single one knelt. Tears burned Ilara's eyes instantly. Not from fear. Recognition. Some instinct deeper than memory whispered the truth inside her bones. They had been waiting. For centuries. Another contraction tore through her violently. The wolves outside growled low in response. The largest stepped forward into the tower slowly. Ilara should have panicked. Instead, something inside her calmed. The giant beast lowered itself beside her protectively while she fought to breathe through the pain. "You know me," she whispered weakly. The wolf touched its forehead gently against her shaking hand. And suddenly, images exploded through Ilara's mind. A kingdom swallowed in black fire. A woman with silver black eyes, standing beneath an eclipsed moon. Twin wolf infants wrapped in shadows. Kings kneeling. Blood across snow. And finally, a throne buried beneath ice. Ilara gasped sharply as the vision vanished. The wolf's golden eyes remained fixed on her, not worshipful, grieving, as if it remembered losing her once already. Another scream ripped from Ilara's throat. The birth had started, for real this time, and the mountain itself responded. The runes beneath the tower blazed brighter. Outside, the snow began circling the ruins unnaturally fast. Deep beneath Frostvein Pass, something ancient awakened fully. Ronan rode like death itself hunted him. His black warhorse tore through snow-covered forests, while the broken mate bond guided him northward with unbearable intensity. Pain flooded through him constantly now. Not only Ilara's, the twins. He could feel them, two tiny, furious consciousnesses burning inside the darkness. Impossible strength, impossible hunger, and underneath it all, fear. Not their fear. His wolves. The dying beast inside Ronan had stopped weakening entirely since the labor began. It was terrified, as if something older and stronger had finally returned to claim dominance. The king pushed harder. Snow whipped across his face, while memories clawed relentlessly through his mind. Ilara smiling faintly while feeding kennel pups. Ilara touching his wound after the assassination attempt. Ilara asking quietly whether any servant bleeding in the kitchens received royal protection. And finally, Ilara looking at him beneath the blood eclipse after he rejected her. Not hateful, heartbroken. That memory nearly destroyed him. Ronan had told himself the rejection was necessary. Strategic, temporary. He thought Exile would buy time to weaken the council's influence before bringing her home safely. Instead, he had sent his pregnant mate into a death storm, while carrying children powerful enough to terrify an entire kingdom. And now she might die before he reached her. His wolf roared inside him violently enough to blur his vision. Faster, faster. Then, suddenly, the bond exploded with pain. Ronan nearly fell from the horse. A cry echoed through the mountains. A newborn cry, followed instantly by another. Not human infants, wolf cubs. The storm around him stopped completely. Every wolf in the surrounding forests emerged silently from the trees. Then, one by one, they bowed toward the mountains ahead. Ronan's blood turned cold. No, the children had been born, and the entire north had just recognized them. Inside the ruined tower, darkness breathed. Ilara collapsed back against the stone floor, trembling violently, while blood and silver-black light spread beneath her body like liquid moonfire. The first child lay against her chest, wrapped in torn fabric. Tiny, beautiful, and impossible. The infant had thick black hair already damp against his small head, but it was his eyes that stole Ilara's breath. Silver, glowing silver, not human eyes, wolf eyes. The child looked up at her silently, then growled softly. A second cry filled the tower. The other twin. Ilara reached trembling hands toward her daughter, as another wave of black-silver light erupted through the room. The newborn girl shifted before Ilara's eyes. One moment, infant. The next, a tiny black wolf cub no larger than a house cat lay crying against the stone floor. Ilara stared in shock. The cub's glowing silver eyes opened slowly. Outside the tower, every ancient wolf dropped fully onto its stomach. Submission, complete and unquestioning. The male infant in Ilara's arms suddenly shifted too. Black fur burst across tiny limbs. A second wolf cub blinked up at her sleepily. Ilara burst into tears. Not fear, not horror. Wunder. The twins crawled instinctively against her chest, soft black fur glowing faintly beneath the eclipse light pouring through the broken tower roof. And then, the mountain growled. A deep, cracking sound thundered beneath the ruins. The ancient wolves outside immediately rose to their feet, snarling. Danger. Ilara looked toward the doorway just as screams echoed faintly through the storm beyond. Human screams. Then the scent reached her. Blood. Silver weapons. Royal soldiers. No. The council had followed her, and they had come for the children. The first soldier died before he ever saw the children. His scream echoed once through the storm, then vanished beneath the sound of tearing flesh. Outside the ruined watchtower, the ancient wolves descended like shadows breaking loose from the mountain itself. Snow exploded beneath massive paws. Silver armor shattered. Horses reared in panic as black-furred beasts ripped through the advancing royal soldiers with terrifying precision. But these were not wild wolves. Ilara realized that immediately. They fought like guardians, protectors. Not a single wolf crossed into the tower itself. Not one came near the newborn twins curled against her chest. Every movement centered around defending her, protecting the heirs. Another scream cut through the blizzard. Then came the unmistakable sound of silver arrows firing. The wolves howled in fury. Ilara forced herself upright despite the exhaustion threatening to drag her unconscious. Blood loss made the ruined tower spin around her. The twins still partially shifted into black wolf cubs pressed instinctively against her body beneath the torn blanket. Tiny growls rumbled from them. Protective. Possessive. The male cub suddenly lifted his head sharply toward the storm outside. Then both twins began snarling. A second later, a body crashed violently through the tower entrance. A royal soldier skidded across the stone floor, throat torn open. Dead. Elara froze. Heavy footsteps approached through the snow. Not wolves. Humans. The surviving soldiers were retreating inward, and leading them. A tall figure in silver-black armor stepped through the storm carrying a wolfsbane spear. Commander Thorn. Ilara's blood turned cold instantly. Of all the council's loyal dogs, Thorn was the worst. Not because he enjoyed cruelty, because he believed in it. The commander had spent his life convinced that weakness destroyed kingdoms. Mercy, in his eyes, was simply another form of betrayal waiting to happen. He had served House Vaelric since before Ronan took the throne, and unlike the council nobles hiding behind politics, Thorn willingly stained his hands for the crown. His pale eyes locked immediately onto the twins against Alara's chest. For the first time in years, the commander looked afraid. "So it's true," he said quietly. The wolf cubs bared tiny glowing teeth. Behind Thorn, surviving soldiers formed a defensive line near the entrance while ancient wolves circled outside beyond the storm. Neither side attacked yet. The tension itself felt alive. Ilara pulled the twins closer protectively. "You shouldn't have come here." Thorn lowered his spear slightly. "The council gave orders." "The council gave many orders." Her voice sharpened, despite exhaustion, including the order to murder newborn children. Something flickered briefly across his expression. "Not guilt. Conflict. They are not ordinary children," he answered. "No," Ilara whispered. "They are innocent ones." The commander's jaw tightened. Outside, the giant scarred wolf standing guard near the tower entrance growled low in its throat. Thorn noticed it, and slowly, realization dawned across his face. "The old guardians," he murmured. "They survived." Ilara followed his gaze toward the enormous beast. The ancient wolf stared back at the commander with open hatred. Thorn suddenly understood something even worse. The legends were real. Not stories. Not superstition. The shadow bloodline had truly existed, and the wolves themselves still remembered. One of the soldiers behind him panicked suddenly and raised his crossbow toward the twins. Everything happened instantly. The ancient guardian wolf lunged. The soldier fired. Ilara screamed. A burst of black-silver power exploded through the tower before the arrow ever reached the children. Time itself seemed to freeze for one horrifying second. The bolt stopped in midair, then slowly turned black. The metal rotted instantly into ash before falling harmlessly to the floor. Silence swallowed the tower. Ilara stared at her own outstretched hand in shock. Dark silver smoke curled faintly around her fingers. The twins whimpered softly, and every wolf outside the ruins immediately lowered its head toward her. Thorn took one slow step backward. "You stopped iron," he whispered. Ilara's breathing turned uneven. She hadn't meant to. The power reacted on instinct, on fear, on the desperate need to protect her children. That frightened her more than anyone else in the room, because for one terrible moment, the magic had felt good, ancien, natural, like something buried inside her finally breathing for the first time. The male cub suddenly climbed shakily from the blanket and stood between Ilara and the soldiers despite being barely minutes old. Tiny black fur bristled. Silver eyes glowed brighter. Then the cub growled. The tower trembled. Outside, every wolf answered immediately. The mountains themselves echoed with howls. Several soldiers stumbled backward in terror. Thorn stared at the tiny cub as though seeing death wearing newborn skin. "The air commands them already." Another soldier whispered shakily, "Commander, we need to leave." But Thorn didn't move, because he had finally realized the truth behind the council's panic. These children would not need armies to take the throne one day. The wolves themselves would give it willingly. Suddenly, a distant roar thundered through the mountains. Horse hooves, fast, violent, coming directly toward the ruins. The wolves outside reacted instantly, not aggressively, Excited, hopeful. Ilara felt the mate bond ignite painfully. Ronan. Relief hit her so hard it nearly hurt. Then anger followed immediately after, because part of her still wanted him here, even after everything. The storm exploded apart moments later, as the Alpha King rode into the ruined battlefield below the tower. The sight stopped everyone cold. Ronan looked less like a king than a war god dragged from nightmare. Snow and blood covered his black armor. His horse foamed with exhaustion beneath him. Golden wolf eyes burned beneath strands of dark hair while his wolf pushed dangerously close to the surface. Bodies littered the snow around him. Not only soldiers, wolves too. The king took in the scene instantly. The dead, the tower, the ancient guardian wolves, and finally, Ilara holding 2 black wolf cubs against her chest. Ronan stopped breathing. The twins looked at him together. Then both cubs growled softly. The mate bond between father and children slammed into existence like lightning. Ronan nearly staggered beneath its force. Mine. Not possessive. Protective. Primal. The king dismounted slowly, without taking his eyes off them. Commander Thorne immediately bowed his head. Your Majesty. Ronan ignored him completely. His attention remained fixed on Ilara, on the blood staining her dress, on the exhaustion hollowing her face, on the tiny cubs pressed against her heartbeat. Pain crossed his expression so briefly most would have missed it. Ilara didn't. You came, she whispered. Ronan looked wrecked by those words. Of course I came. The answer came too quickly, too honestly. Silence stretched painfully between them. Then one of the cubs sneezed. The tiny sound shattered the tension instantly. Ronan's gaze dropped toward the twins again. Wonder softened his face despite himself. The daughter blinked sleepy silver eyes up at him. Then, the cub crawled from Ilara's arms, directly toward the king. Ronan froze. The tiny wolf reached his boot, sniffed once, and immediately shifted back into infant form against the snow. A newborn baby girl stared up at the terrifying Alpha King with glowing silver eyes, then wrapped her tiny hand around his finger. The world stopped. Ilara saw it happen, saw the exact moment Ronan's remaining walls finally cracked, not because of prophecy, not because of politics, because his daughter trusted him instantly. Despite everything, Ronan looked down at the infant in complete silence, then very carefully lifted her into his arms. The baby relaxed against his chest immediately, and something impossible happened. The black veins beneath Ronan's throat vanished. His dying wolf quieted completely for the first time in years. Commander Thorne saw it too. His eyes widened in shock. The curse, he breathed. Not a curse. A bond. The children were healing the royal bloodline. Ronan slowly looked toward Ilara. She understood instantly. The Shadow Heirs were never meant to destroy House Vaelric. They were meant to restore it. Which meant the council had lied for generations. The realization hit everyone at once, and that was precisely when the betrayal came. A silver arrow burst through the storm straight toward the infant in Ronan's arms. Ilara screamed. Ronan turned instantly, too slow. The arrow flew directly toward the child's heart, and Commander Thorne stepped in front of it. The silver bolt punched through his chest violently. Blood exploded across the snow. The commander collapsed hard to one knee. Everyone froze. Another figure emerged from the storm above the ridge. Lord Marin, surrounded by elite council guards. The old lord lowered his bow calmly. I warned you what would happen if emotion ruled the throne, he said coldly. Ronan handed the infant instantly back toward Ilara, as murder exploded across his face. But Marin only smiled faintly. Look around you, Your Majesty. The wolves kneel to those children already. His gaze shifted toward the twins. If they live, House Vaelric ends. Ronan drew his sword slowly. No, he said quietly. Only your lies do. And beneath the blood eclipse, the king finally chose a side. The mountain wind died the moment Ronan drew his sword. Not weakened. Stopped. Snow hung suspended in the air beneath the blood eclipse, while ancient wolves circled the ruins in complete silence. Even the storm itself seemed to recoil from the fury rising off the Alpha King. Lord Meron stood unmoving atop the ridge, silver cloak snapping behind him, elite council guards spreading into formation around him, with wolfsbane spears gleaming darkly beneath the red moonlight. Below them, Commander Thorn knelt bleeding heavily into the snow. The silver arrow through his chest should have killed him instantly. It hadn't. The commander's breathing came rough and wet as he pressed one shaking hand against the wound. Black blood spread beneath his armor, where the wolfsbane poison mixed strangely with his own. Ilada stared in horror. Then realization struck her cold. The arrow had not been meant only for the child. It had been coated in silver ash, temple poison, designed specifically for shadow blood. Meron had intended to test the twins publicly. If the poison killed them, the council gained proof they were unnatural. And if it didn't, the council would confirm something far more dangerous. Ronan understood too. His expression changed. No shock. Recognition. You already knew, he said softly. Meron met his gaze without fear. I knew the old bloodline survived somewhere. The council lord slowly descended the ridge toward the ruined tower, while snow crunched beneath polished boots. What I did not know, he continued calmly, was that House Vaelric's downfall would arrive inside your mate's womb. The wolves around the ruins growled instantly. The old man ignored them. Ilara held the twins tighter against her chest as Ronan moved protectively in front of her without hesitation. That small action did something terrible to her heart, because he was no longer choosing the throne first, and part of her still wanted to believe him. Meron noticed it too. You love her now, he observed quietly. Ronan's jaw tightened. No, Meron corrected himself softly. Worse. You finally chose her. Silence stretched between them. The council guards grew visibly uneasy, because the king standing before them no longer looked controlled. His wolf pressed fully against his skin now, eyes glowing molten gold beneath the eclipse, while dark claws slowly emerged from his fingertips. Ilara felt the rage pouring through the mate bond. Not reckless rage, focused rage, predatory. Ronan was deciding who died first. Meron sighed softly. You think this is cruelty, but I protected your family for 30 years. His eyes sharpened. Do you truly believe your father never discovered the truth about the shadow bloodline? Ronan went still. The old council lord smiled sadly. There it is. Ilara's pulse quickened. What truth? Meron looked toward the twins. The shadow bloodline was not destroyed because they were evil. His voice lowered. They were destroyed because the northern packs feared them. The ancient wolves surrounding the ruins listened silently, as though they too remembered. 500 years ago, Meron continued, the first Shadow Queen united wolves, beneath a single crown. No war, no rival packs, no famine. The kingdom prospered under her rule. Ilara frowned. That was not what the stories claimed. Meron's expression darkened. But power that inspires devotion also inspires terror. The packs realized something dangerous. His eyes shifted toward the twins. The wolves loved the shadow bloodline more than they loved fear itself. Ronan's grip tightened around his sword. The first Vaelric king betrayed them. Yes, the answer came, without hesitation. Even the wind seemed to recoil from hearing it spoken aloud. Meron stopped, only a few yards away now. The crown was stolen, he admitted quietly. The old bloodline slaughtered beneath the blood eclipse, and every generation afterward inherited the same burden. His eyes locked onto Ronan. Protect the lie, no matter the cost. Ilara felt sick. Everything. The kingdom, the crown, the hatred surrounding her mark, built upon murder. Ronan looked physically ill beneath the realization. You helped continue it. I helped preserve peace. The old lord's voice sharpened for the first time. You think love matters more than stability? You think the packs will peacefully kneel once they learn their kings were built on stolen blood? Meron gestured toward the twins. Those children are not symbols of hope. They are civil war waiting to happen. One of the twins whimpered softly. Immediately, every wolf outside the ruins raised its head alertly. The old man noticed. and fear finally touched his face. Because no matter how calmly he spoke, the mountain itself already belonged to the heirs. Commander Thorn coughed violently beside the ruined tower wall. Blood stained the snow black beneath him now. Ilara moved instinctively toward him despite Ronan's warning growl. The commander looked up weakly. "Don't," he rasped. "You saved my daughter." His pale eyes flickered toward the infant curled against her chest. "I served your enemies my entire life." His breathing hitched painfully. "Seems fair I disappoint them once before dying." Ilara knelt beside him carefully. The black-silver power beneath her skin stirred instantly near the poisoned wound. The twins shifted. Ronan noticed immediately. Ilara. But she already understood. The children had healed Ronan's dying wolf. Maybe their blood could heal more. Thorn saw realization cross her face and immediately shook his head weakly. "No shadow magic. You'll die." The commander laughed bitterly, coughing blood across his lips. "Probably deserve it." Ilara hesitated. Everything around her still felt unstable. The power inside her frightened her. But when she looked down at the twins pressed against her heartbeat, something deep beneath the fear hardened quietly. She was done watching people die because others feared what she carried. Slowly, Ilara placed her hand against Thorn's chest wound. The world exploded. Black-silver light burst violently outward across the snow-covered ruins. The ancient runes beneath the mountain ignited instantly. Every wolf surrounding the tower dropped low against the ground with startled whines. And beneath Ilara's palm, the poison screamed. Not metaphorically. Actually screamed. Dark smoke erupted from the commander's wound as silver ash burned itself out of his blood. Thorn convulsed hard enough to crack ice beneath him. Ilara gasped, as visions tore through her mind again. A throne buried beneath snow, twin heirs crowned in moonfire, a king kneeling willingly before a shadow queen, and finally, Ronan dying alone beneath a burning palace. The vision shattered instantly. Ilara jerked backward, breathing hard. Thorn collapsed unconscious into the snow. Alive, completely healed. Silence consumed the ruins. The council guards stared in horror. Meron looked devastated. Not because she healed the commander, because he recognized the magic. "The Moon Sovereign," he whispered. Ronan turned sharply toward him. "What does that mean?" The old lord looked suddenly exhausted. "Not shadow corruption," he said hollowly. "Restoration." Ilara's pulse quickened. Meron slowly lowered his bow. The Shadow Queens were never destroyers. They were chosen by the old moon itself to maintain balance between the packs. His eyes shifted painfully toward the twins. "The reason wolves kneel to them is because their blood carries the original sovereign bond." The truth settled over the mountain like falling ash. Ronan stared at the children, then at Ilara, and finally understood why his dying wolf had responded to them immediately. Not because they were replacing House Vaelric, because House Vaelric had broken something sacred generations ago, and the twins were healing it. One of the council guards panicked suddenly. "This is madness," he hissed. "If the packs learn this, they will." Ronan interrupted coldly. The guard froze. Ronan stepped forward slowly beneath the blood eclipse, sword gleaming dark silver in his hand. "No more lies," he said. Meron's expression tightened. "You would destroy your own throne?" Ronan looked toward Ilara, toward the twins, toward the ancient wolves already kneeling around them like living history returned from the grave. Then the king spoke the words that changed the North forever. "If my throne requires their deaths," he said quietly, "then it deserves to burn." The council guards moved instantly. Not strategically, desperately. Fear finally overcame loyalty. Spears lifted. Arrows drew. Someone shouted for the heirs to be killed before the wolves could spread the truth, and the mountain answered with fury. The ancient guardian wolves attacked all at once. Snow exploded beneath massive bodies as the ruins descended instantly into chaos. Guards screamed. Wolves tore through silver armor. Blood splattered across the ice beneath the eclipse. Ronan transformed mid-charge. Bones cracked violently. Black fur erupted across his skin. His monstrous wolf form burst forward larger than any beast in the north, golden eyes blazing like wildfire beneath the storm-dark sky. But Elara saw the difference immediately. Before the twins were born, Ronan's wolf had looked half-rotted by exhaustion. No, he looked unstoppable. The heirs had healed him completely. The Alpha King crashed into the council guards like living death. Steel shattered. Men flew backward across the snow. The mountain itself trembled beneath the violence of his rage. Yet through all the chaos, Ronan never moved far from Elara, never stopped guarding her. And for the first time since the rejection beneath the eclipse, Elara allowed herself to believe he might truly choose them over everything else. Then she saw Lord Merrin quietly reach for another arrow, not aimed at the twins, at Ronan, poisoned silver. The old lord's face twisted with grief as he drew the bowstring back, because this was never about hatred. It was about fear, and terrified people destroyed the things they could not control. Elara moved before thinking. Ronan. The arrow flew, straight toward the king's heart. The arrow never reached him. Elara did not remember moving. One heartbeat she stood beside the ruined tower, clutching the twins against her chest, while wolves and soldiers tore each other apart across the mountain. The next, dark silver fire exploded from her body. The world around her slowed violently. Snow hung motionless in the air. Blood froze into floating crimson droplets. Even the poisoned arrow traveling toward Ronan's heart seemed trapped inside invisible ice. Every living thing on the battlefield turned toward her. And for the first time, since the blood eclipse began, the sleeping power inside Elara fully opened its eyes. The black crescent mark beneath her ribs blazed like moonfire. Ancient symbols spread across her skin in glowing silver-black patterns, crawling over her throat, arms, and bare feet like living ink. The wind screamed around her as shadows gathered beneath the mountain ruins. Not darkness. Wolves. Hundreds of spectral wolves emerged from the storm itself. Transparent. Massive. Ancient. Beyond comprehension. The dead guardians of the shadow bloodline had returned. The poisoned arrow hanging frozen in the air suddenly blackened, then shattered into dust. Silence swallowed Frostvane Pass. Even the battle stopped. Ronan's enormous wolf form stood motionless in the blood-stained snow, golden eyes fixed entirely on Elara, not with fear, with awe, because she no longer looked mortal. Moonlight bent around her unnaturally. Black silver flames curled gently across the ground without consuming it. Her dark hair moved in a wind no one else could feel. And behind her, a gigantic spectral wolf slowly rose from the shadows beneath the mountain. The spirit towered above the ruins larger than the palace gates of Verhold itself. Its silver eyes glowed like eclipsed moons as ancient fur made of darkness, and starlight rippled through the storm. Every wolf immediately dropped flat against the snow. Submission. Absolute. The twins whimpered softly against Elara's chest. The giant spirit wolf lowered its massive head toward them. Not predator. Guardian. Lord Merrin stumbled backward in horror. No, he whispered. The old council lord looked suddenly ancient beneath the eclipse light. The first queen. Elara barely heard him. The power moving through her drowned everything else. She could feel the mountain beneath her feet, feel the wolves surrounding Frostvane Pass, feel the fear spreading through the surviving soldiers. And strongest of all, she felt Ronan, his wolf, his heart. The shattered mate bond between them pulsed painfully through the storm. Mine, not ownership. Belonging. Ronan slowly shifted back into human form despite blood covering his skin from battle wounds. His chest rose heavily as he stared at her like a man witnessing a miracle he no longer deserved to touch. Elara. His voice broke. That sound nearly shattered her resolve more than the council ever had. Because despite everything, she still loved him. The realization hurt. The ancient spirit wolf behind her growled softly. The entire mountain trembled. Lord Merrin regained himself enough to raise his sword shakily toward her. You don't understand what will happen now, he warned desperately. The packs will tear each other apart for her claim. Elara looked at him finally. And the old lord flinched, not because she appeared cruel, because she looked unbearably calm. "You built your kingdom on fear," she said quietly. Her voice echoed strangely now, layered with something older beneath it. "You murdered an entire bloodline to keep wolves obedient." Mehran's face tightened painfully. "We prevented war." "No," Ronan said. The king stepped forward beside Alara slowly. "You created one that lasted 500 years. The words hit harder than any blade. Because they were true. Every rival pack conflict. Every rebellion. Every weakening king. Every dying wolf inside House Vaelric. All consequences of the broken sovereign bond." The old lord looked suddenly exhausted. "I protected the north. You protected your control," Alara answered softly. The twins stirred against her chest again. The little girl opened glowing silver eyes toward Mehran, then growled, tiny, sleepy. But the effect was immediate. The surviving wolves surrounding the battlefield snarled in unison. The old council lord finally understood something terrifying. The heirs did not need armies. One command from them, and the wolves themselves would tear kingdoms apart. Fear flickered across Mehran's face again. Then, sorrow followed. "You think they will love her forever?" he asked Ronan bitterly. "The moment the packs fear her power, they will betray her too." Ronan looked toward Alara, toward the woman he had publicly rejected to save a throne now stained with generations of lies. Then, he made his choice, completely. "If they touch her," he said quietly, "they answer to me." The mountain fell silent, because every wolf there understood exactly what the Alpha King had just done. He chose her publicly, not as weakness, not secretly, as king. The surviving council guards immediately backed away in visible panic. One dropped his weapon entirely. Another whispered, "The throne is broken." No, the throne was changing, and everyone could feel it. The spectral wolf behind Alara suddenly lifted its enormous head toward the blood eclipse. A howl erupted across Frostvane Pass, so powerful the mountains shook beneath it. The sound spread outward through the north instantly, across forests, across frozen rivers, across every pack territory from Verhold to the eastern borders, and every wolf that heard it reacted the same way. They bowed. Far away, inside the royal capital, wolves throughout the city dropped low against the streets. Guards collapsed to one knee atop the palace walls. Even chained war beasts inside the royal kennels whimpered softly toward the northern mountains. The old bond had awakened, and the kingdom knew it. Mehran heard it too. Hopelessness crossed his face for the first time. "It's over," one surviving guard whispered. The council lord closed his eyes briefly. "Yes," he admitted. Then suddenly, he drew a hidden dagger and lunged toward the twins. Ronan moved instantly. So did Alara, but neither reached him first. Commander Thorn slammed into Mehran from the side hard enough to send both men crashing violently into the snow. The old lord stared upward in shock. "You?" he rasped. Thorn pinned him down despite fresh blood staining his armor. "I served your fear long enough." Mehran's face twisted with something almost like betrayal. "You would abandon the kingdom for them?" The commander's pale eyes shifted briefly toward Alara, holding the twins beneath the eclipse light. Then toward Ronan standing beside her, and finally toward the ancient wolves kneeling all around them. "No," Thorn said quietly. "I think they are the first chance this kingdom has ever had." Mehran looked suddenly very tired. Not evil, not monstrous. Simply a man who had spent too many years believing survival justified cruelty. The old lord slowly lowered the dagger. The fight left him all at once. Snow fell softly around the ruins again. The storm had finally begun calming. Alara stared at him for a long moment, then quietly asked the question still haunting her heart. "Did you know what the rejection would do to me?" Mehran looked away first. Yes. Pain twisted through Ronan instantly. The king's face darkened with horror. The council lord exhaled shakily. The eclipse rejection was designed centuries ago for one purpose. His eyes closed briefly. To force dormant shadow blood into awakening. Silence. Alara stopped breathing. Ronan looked murderous. "You used her." Meron laughed bitterly. "I used all of you." His voice cracked softly. "Because I was terrified of what would happen if the heirs were born before the kingdom was ready." The twins shifted quietly against Alara's chest. The little boy blinked up at the old council lord. Then, the infant reached one tiny hand outward. Toward him, Meron froze completely. The baby's glowing silver eyes held no hatred, no fear, only innocent curiosity. That nearly destroyed the old man. His face crumpled slowly beneath centuries of guilt, not truly his own. And for the first time since this began, Lord Meron wept. Not loudly, not dramatically, quietly, like someone finally crushed beneath the weight of history. Ronan stepped closer to Alara carefully, not touching yet, still afraid she would pull away. "You should hate me," he admitted hoarsely. Alara looked at him beneath the fading eclipse light. "I tried." The answer wrecked him. She saw it happen. Saw the Alpha King, the terrifying ruler feared across the north, break quietly beneath relief and grief and love all tangled together inside him. Ronan lowered himself slowly to one knee before her in the snow, not because the wolves demanded it, because he chose to. His voice turned rough. "I cannot undo what I did beneath the eclipse." No, he couldn't. Some wounds survived forever, but he kept speaking anyway. "I chose fear over you." His eyes lifted to hers painfully. "And I will regret it until my last breath." The mountain remained silent around them, waiting. Alara looked down at the twins sleeping peacefully against her chest, then at the king kneeling before her, and deep inside herself. The ancient sleeping wolf finally stopped feeling alone. The blood eclipse ended at dawn. Red light slowly faded from the mountains, while pale winter sunlight spilled across Frostvane Pass for the first time in days. Snow covered the battlefield in soft silence, hiding the dead beneath white frost, as though the mountain itself wished to bury the violence quickly. But nothing about the north would be buried again. Not after what the wolves had witnessed. Not after what they had felt. The ancient sovereign bond now pulsed through every pack territory, like a heartbeat returning after centuries of death. And everyone knew where it had awakened. The Shadow Heirs were alive. Word spread faster than riders could carry it. Before Ronan, Alara, and the twins even descended from Frostvane Pass, entire villages had already begun, whispering impossible stories. Wolves refusing old commands. Rival pack beasts, suddenly standing peacefully beside one another. Children dreaming of silver-eyed cubs beneath eclipsed moons. The kingdom was changing, and that terrified the royal council, far more than war ever had. The journey back to Verhold felt unreal. Ronan rode beside Alara the entire way without allowing another guard near her. Not because she needed protection anymore, because he did not trust himself to let her out of sight. The twins slept wrapped inside heavy black furs against Alara's chest. Most of the time they remained in human form now, though occasionally tiny patches of black fur appeared along their arms when they dreamed. Each time it happened, nearby wolves immediately lowered their heads. The ancient guardian pack followed at a distance through the forests surrounding the road, silent, watching. Not once did they threaten anyone, but every soldier escorting the king looked deeply unsettled by their presence. Commander Thorn rode several lengths behind them, recovering slowly from his wound. The commander spoke little now. Something inside him had shifted permanently atop the mountain. He no longer looked at Alara with suspicion. He looked at her with responsibility, as though he had finally remembered what loyalty was supposed to mean. The only person riding under guard was Lord Meron. The old council lord had surrendered quietly after the battle, offering no resistance as royal soldiers confiscated his weapons. Yet despite chains binding his wrists, he remained strangely calm, almost relieved. Ronan had not decided whether to imprison him or execute him. Alara suspected the king still struggled with the truth that Meron had not entirely been villain or protector. Only a man so terrified of losing control that he destroyed innocent people trying to preserve it. That frightened her more than monsters. Because ordinary fear built the cruelest kingdoms. By the third night of travel, they stopped beside a frozen river beneath towering pine forests. Soldiers established camp carefully while wolves watched silently from the tree line. Ilara sat near the fire, nursing the twins while snow drifted softly through the darkness around them. Ronan approached slowly. He always approached slowly now. As though she were something wounded he feared frightening away. "Have they eaten?" he asked quietly. Ilara nodded without looking up. "Both." The king lowered himself onto the fallen log beside her. For several moments neither spoke. The silence between them no longer felt angry, just fragile. Ronan finally looked toward the sleeping twins. "Do they always stare at me like they know something?" Despite herself, Ilara almost smiled faintly. The little girl had indeed spent most of the journey glaring suspiciously at her father whenever he came near. "She dislikes you." Ronan winced visibly. "Fair." That nearly made her laugh. The realization startled her. She had forgotten what it felt like to want laughter. Ronan noticed the shift in her expression immediately. His gaze softened carefully. "I missed that." The warmth vanished from Ilara's face at once. Pain flickered through the mate bond instantly. Ronan looked away first. "You should not forgive me quickly," he said quietly. "I'm not sure I know how to forgive you at all." The honesty hurt both of them, but neither looked away this time. Ronan rested his forearms against his knees, staring into the fire. "When my father died, the council placed the crown on my head before his body was cold." His voice turned distant. "Meron told me the throne survived because kings sacrificed what they loved before enemies could use it against them." Ilara listened silently. "I believed him." Bitterness roughened his voice. "Every decision afterward became easier if I convinced myself mercy was weakness." His golden eyes shifted toward the twins again. "Then you happened." The mate bond pulsed painfully between them. Ilara looked down at the little boy sleeping against her chest. "Healing you was never supposed to cost me my dignity." Ronan closed his eyes briefly. Because that was the wound neither of them could escape. Not the exile. Not the council. The public rejection. The humiliation beneath the eclipse, while the entire kingdom watched. Ronan spoke softly. "I would tear that moment from history if I could. But you can't." "No." Silence stretched again. The fire crackled softly between them. Finally, Ilara whispered the question haunting her since the mountain. "When you rejected me." Her throat tightened painfully. "Did any part of you mean it?" Ronan answered immediately. "Never." The force of the answer stunned her. The king looked almost furious she could doubt it. "My wolf nearly tore itself apart when I spoke the words." His voice roughened. "I thought Exile would buy time to remove the council before bringing you back safely." Ilara stared at him in disbelief. "You sent me into Frostvein Pass during the blood eclipse." Regret crossed his face instantly. "I know. No excuse. No defense. Just grief. And somehow, that honesty hurt more." The twins stirred softly. Then suddenly, the little girl opened glowing silver eyes directly toward the forest behind camp. Instantly, every ancient wolf in the trees rose alert. Ronan's posture sharpened immediately. Danger. Commander Thorn was already reaching for his sword when riders burst from the darkness beyond the camp perimeter. Royal scouts. Terrified. One nearly fell from his horse. "Your Majesty." The scout's breathing came ragged from exhaustion. "Verhold is in revolt." The entire camp went still. Ronan rose slowly to his feet. "What happened?" The scout swallowed hard. The northern packs heard the howl from Frostvein Pass. Fear flashed across his face. "Half the city believes the Shadow Queen has returned." Another scout spoke shakily. "The council is splitting. Some nobles want the heirs crowned immediately. Others are demanding the children be executed before the wolves fully abandon House Vaelric." The twins growled softly in their sleep. Ronan's expression darkened dangerously. "How many casualties?" "Not many yet. But the palace guard is fracturing." The scout hesitated. "And the temple priestesses sealed the moon sanctuary this morning." Ilara frowned. "Why?" The scout looked toward her nervously. "They claim the old temple beneath Verhold has awakened." Silence crashed over the camp. Even Meron lifted his head sharply at that. Ronan noticed instantly. "You know something." The old council lord looked deeply troubled for the first time since the mountain. The moon sanctuary was built above the original throne chamber of the Shadow Queens, he admitted quietly. Ilara's pulse quickened. What throne chamber? Meron's eyes shifted toward the twins. The first sovereign bond was created there. The fire crackled softly. No one spoke. Then the old man added the part that chilled the entire camp. If the sanctuary truly awakened, his voice lowered, then the kingdom itself may already be recognizing the heirs. Ronan cursed softly beneath his breath, because that changed everything. This was no longer only political. The old magic itself had chosen a side. The little boy suddenly opened his silver eyes, then pointed toward Verhold. The infant's tiny voice came out barely above a whisper. Home. Everyone froze. Ilara stopped breathing. The twins had never spoken before. Ronan slowly knelt beside them. The little boy blinked sleepily up at his father, then repeated softly, Home. A deep howl echoed through the forest instantly. Then another, and another. Not threatening, calling. From every direction across the north, the wolves were summoning their sovereigns back to the capital. Ronan looked toward Verhold, far beyond the frozen mountains, toward the kingdom waiting on the edge of collapse. Then, finally toward Ilara. We return at dawn. Fear flickered through her chest immediately. Not for herself, for the twins, for what waited inside the capital. Because Verhold had not merely rejected her once. It had watched her break publicly. And now, she would return carrying heirs powerful enough to change the throne forever. Ronan seemed to sense the fear beneath her silence. The king stepped closer carefully. Then, in front of every soldier, every wolf, every watching pair of eyes, he removed the royal cloak from his shoulders and wrapped it gently around her and the twins. The black fur carried his scent, his protection, his claim. A murmur spread through the camp instantly, because every person there understood exactly what it meant. The Alpha King was no longer hiding his choice. Ilara looked up at him slowly, and for the first time since the blood eclipse, Ronan touched her without hesitation. His hand rested softly against her cheek. Not possessive, not demanding, reverent. If they force you to stand alone again, he said quietly, they will stand against me first. The mate bond trembled painfully between them, not healed, but healing. And far away beyond the mountains, the bells of Verhold suddenly began ringing by themselves. The bells did not stop ringing for the entire night. Across Verhold, people woke from uneasy sleep to the sound echoing through the frozen streets like a warning from the dead. The bells of the moon sanctuary had remained silent for nearly 2 centuries. No priestess alive remembered hearing them. Yet now they rang without human hands touching them. Once for the return of the heirs, once for the awakening beneath the city, and once for the blood debt House Veilric could no longer hide. By dawn, fear had already divided the capital. Some wolves gathered outside the palace, demanding the shadow heirs be presented before the packs. Others armed themselves in the lower districts, convinced the return of the old bloodline meant the kingdom would fall into darkness again. Rumors spread faster than fire. The children healed, dying wolves. The children commanded beasts. The children were monsters. The children were saviors. No one agreed on the truth anymore, and that uncertainty terrified the nobles most of all. When Ronan's party finally approached the gates of Verhold, silence swallowed the city. Snow drifted softly across the towering black walls, while hundreds of citizens lined the streets watching, waiting. The gates opened slowly, not because guards commanded them, because the wolves guarding them stepped aside on their own. Ilara felt every eye turn toward her immediately, not toward the king, toward her. The woman once dragged through these same gates in chains now rode beneath the royal cloak, carrying the children who had awakened the entire north. The twins remained asleep against her chest, wrapped in dark furs, silver-black wisps of magic occasionally curling around their tiny fingers when they dreamed. People noticed. Fear rippled through the crowd, but something else moved beneath it too. Recognition. The wolves among the crowd lowered their heads instinctively as Ilara passed. Even their human companions, seemed unsettled by the reaction. One old woman near the market square suddenly dropped to her knees weeping. "The moon remembers," she whispered. Others followed. Not everyone, but enough. Enough to make the city tremble with uncertainty. Ronan rode beside Alara, in complete silence, golden eyes scanning rooftops and alleyways constantly for threats. His hand never strayed far from his sword. Commander Thorn led soldiers ahead, clearing the streets carefully, while ancient guardian wolves moved silently through the crowds like living shadows. No one dared attack. Not openly. Yet Alara could feel the hatred watching from behind shuttered windows. The council still had supporters, and frightened people became dangerous very quickly. As they approached the palace bridge, the moon sanctuary bells rang again, closer this time. The sound vibrated strangely through Alara's chest. The twins stirred immediately. Then both infants opened their glowing silver eyes at once. The little girl sat upright suddenly in Alara's arms and stared directly toward the towering moon temple above the city. A low growl rumbled from her tiny chest. The wolves throughout the streets answered instantly. Every single one. Ronan looked toward the sanctuary sharply. Something was happening there. He felt it too. The old magic beneath the city was waking, and it was calling the heirs home. The palace descended into chaos the moment they entered. Nobles crowded the throne hall, arguing openly, while guards struggled to maintain order beneath towering black banners. Several council members shouted accusations the instant Alara crossed the chamber. She should never have returned. The heirs threaten every northern alliance. The pacts will fracture. Others looked terrified instead of angry, because wolves throughout the palace had already begun kneeling whenever the twins cried. The old hierarchy was breaking apart in real time. Lord Meron entered under guard behind them. The moment the nobles saw him chained, outrage exploded. "You betrayed the council. You sided with Shadow Blood. You endangered the kingdom." The old man looked exhausted. "No," he answered quietly. "I finally saw it clearly. No one listened." Ronan stepped forward before the chaos could worsen. The throne hall fell instantly silent. The king looked terrifying now. Not weakened. Not conflicted. Certain. The council concealed the truth of the Shadow bloodline for centuries. Ronan said coldly. "That deception ends today." Panic spread immediately. Several nobles shouted over one another. "You would destroy House Vaelric? You would place monsters above your own blood?" Ronan's eyes turned lethal. "They are my blood." Silence. Absolute silence. Alara felt the words hit the room like a physical force. The king had acknowledged the heirs publicly, before the entire court. No denial remained now. No distance. No protection behind politics. Ronan looked toward the nobles with undisguised disgust. "You condemned innocent children before birth." His voice darkened. "You exiled their mother during the eclipse, knowing the rejection rite was designed to force her awakening." Several council members visibly paled, because now everyone understood. The rejection had not been law. It had been manipulation. Alara stood frozen near the base of the throne steps, while whispers spread through the hall. Some looked horrified, others guilty. A few looked ashamed. Good. Let them remember. The moon sanctuary bell suddenly rang again. Violently. The entire palace shook. Dust rained from the ceiling as a deep rumbling sound echoed beneath the city. The twins whimpered instantly. Then the little boy pointed toward the floor beneath the throne hall. "Down," he whispered. Every wolf in the palace dropped low against the marble. Fear exploded across the court. Ronan reached Alara immediately. "What's happening?" Before anyone could answer, a crack split the throne room floor. Black silver light burst upward through ancient stone. Nobles screamed. Guards stumbled backward, and beneath the throne itself, ancient runes ignited violently for the first time in centuries. Meron stared in horror. The sanctuary. Another crack thundered across the hall. Then another. The floor beneath the throne began collapsing inward. Ronan pulled Alara protectively toward him, as ancient stone shattered apart, revealing darkness far below the palace. Not ruins. A chamber. Massive. Ancien. Waiting. Cold wind rushed upward carrying the scent of old magic, and wolf blood long buried beneath the kingdom. The twins began glowing softly in Alara's arms. And then, every wolf in the palace bowed toward the opening beneath the throne. The entire court watched in stunned silence as silver-black light rose slowly from the hidden chamber below. Ancient voices whispered through the darkness. Not threatening, welcoming. Alara's breath caught painfully. Somehow, she recognized them. Ronan tightened protectively beside her. "Stay behind me." But the little girl shook her head immediately. Then, in her tiny, sleepy voice, she whispered, "Mother belongs there." The chamber below answered instantly. The darkness erupted into moonlight. A staircase slowly revealed itself beneath the shattered throne, leading deep beneath Verhold into the buried heart of the old kingdom. And at the bottom, a second throne waited. Black stone. Silver claws, marked with the same crescent symbol burned beneath Alara's skin. The true throne of the Shadow Sovereigns. The court stared downward in complete silence. Then one elderly noblewoman suddenly fell trembling to her knees. The old stories were true. More followed. On everyone. Not everyone, but enough. Enough for panic to spread among the remaining council loyalists. "This cannot happen," one lord whispered desperately. "If she sits that throne, the wolves will choose her." Another answered fearfully. Ronan heard it too. The terrible truth beneath their fear. If Alara claimed the old throne publicly, the packs themselves might recognize her as the true sovereign of the North. Not queen beside Ronan. Equal, or worse, above him. The court waited tensely, watching the Alpha King carefully, waiting to see whether he would stop her. The old Ronan might have. The king, raised beneath fear and duty and bloodline obsession, would have destroyed the throne beneath the palace before allowing his power to weaken. But that man had died beneath the blood eclipse. Ronan slowly turned toward Alara. Snowlight from the shattered ceiling caught across his face as he looked at her not with suspicion, but pride. Then, before the entire royal court, the Alpha King offered her his hand. Gasps spread instantly through the chamber, because everyone understood what the gesture meant. Choice, not obligation, not politics. Choice. Alara stared at his outstretched hand for a long moment. The mate bond trembled painfully between them, still scarred, still healing, but real. Slowly, she placed her hand in his, and together, they descended toward the buried throne beneath the kingdom. Above them, the royal court followed in fearful silence, and deep below Verhold, something ancient finally awakened completely. The deeper they descended beneath Verhold, the colder the air became. Not ordinary cold, ancient cold. The kind preserved inside forgotten tombs and abandoned gods. Silver-black flames ignited one by one along the stone staircase as Alara passed, illuminating walls carved with thousands of faded symbols. Wolves, crowns, eclipsed moons, sovereigns kneeling beside queens with glowing eyes, not rulers and servants, partners. The realization settled heavily inside her chest. The old kingdom had not feared powerful women. It had been built beside them. Ronan walked half a step ahead of her, descending into the buried darkness with one hand near his sword and the other never straying far from Alara's back. The twins rested quietly in her arms now, strangely calm beneath the mountain, as though they had finally come home. Behind them, the court followed in nervous silence. Nobles clutched silver charms against evil. Guards watched every shadow with pale faces. Several priestesses whispered frantic prayers beneath their breath. And far behind them all, the wolves came too. Hundreds of them. Royal war beasts. Pack wolves. Ancient guardians from Frostvein Pass. They descended the staircase without conflict for the first time in living memory. United. The sight alone terrified the nobles more than the buried throne ahead ever could, because the wolves had already chosen peace before humans had. The staircase finally opened into a massive underground sanctuary. The entire chamber stole the breath from everyone who entered. It was beautiful, not dark, not monstrous. Moonlight poured through enormous crystal veins embedded in the cavern ceiling, casting silver reflections across black marble floors, polished smooth by centuries long forgotten. Ancient trees with white bark grew from the stone itself, their glowing roots winding around pillars carved into the shapes of kneeling wolves. And at the center of the sanctuary, two thrones faced one another, not one above the other. Equal. The first throne was black stone edged in silver claws. The second was pale silver, carved with dark obsidian moons. Between them stood a circular platform, covered in ancient runes glowing softly beneath the twins' presence. The court stared in stunned silence. "This was hidden beneath us the entire time," one noble whispered. Meron's face looked hollow beneath the moonlight. The old sovereign chamber. Ilara stepped forward slowly. Something inside her recognized the place instantly. Not memory. Inheritance. The closer she moved toward the thrones, the brighter the runes beneath the floor began glowing. The twins stirred. Then both infants reached tiny hands toward the sanctuary center. A heartbeat echoed through the chamber. Not theirs. The kingdom's. Ronan heard it too. Every wolf did. The sovereign bond was awakening fully. One of the priestesses suddenly stepped backward in fear. "Your Majesty, this chamber should be sealed again immediately." Several nobles nodded quickly. "Yes, if the Pax discover this, they already have." The quiet voice interrupted from behind them. Everyone turned sharply. The blind oracle stood at the chamber entrance. Alive. The ancient woman had not been seen in years. Most believed she died after speaking her final prophecy beneath the blood eclipse. Yet now she stood draped in pale, ceremonial robes, silver white eyes clouded but unseeing. The wolves immediately lowered themselves before her, respectfully. Even Ronan looked shocked. The old oracle smiled faintly. "The moon does not release its witnesses so easily." No one moved. The woman slowly approached Ilara. Then, before the entire court, the blind oracle knelt. Panic exploded through the nobles immediately. "She cannot." The oracle kneels, only before the sovereign bond. "This is treason." "No," the old woman whispered softly. "This is remembrance." Her blind eyes lifted toward Ilara. "You carry the blood of queens who united wolves, before fear divided them." Ilara's throat tightened painfully. "I don't know how to rule anyone." The oracle smiled sadly. "That is why the moon chose you instead of them." Silence followed, because everyone understood exactly who she meant. The nobles, the council, the kings who built power through fear. The little girl in Ilara's arms suddenly shifted into her tiny wolf form again and leapt gently from the blanket toward the circular platform between the thrones. The moment her paws touched the ancient runes, the sanctuary erupted with light. Silver-black power exploded upward through the chamber ceiling. Ancient symbols ignited across every wall. The wolves throughout the sanctuary bowed instantly, and the throne room above them shook violently. Verhold itself had recognized the heirs. The little cub stood proudly at the center of the glowing platform, while her brother blinked sleepily from Ilara's arms. Then, the sanctuary spoke, not with words, with memory. Visions burst through the chamber violently enough to stagger everyone present. They saw the first Shadow Queen standing beside the first Wolf King, beneath an eclipsed moon. They saw the sovereign bond, linking all northern packs together peacefully. They saw famine ending, borders opening, rival wolves hunting together instead of slaughtering one another. Then, they saw betrayal. The first Valeric king kneeling falsely before the queen before driving silver through her heart beneath the blood eclipse. Gasps echoed through the sanctuary. Nobles recoiled in horror. Some denied it instantly. Others wept. And Ronan looked physically shattered. Because now everyone had witnessed the truth with their own eyes. Not stories. Not rewritten histories. Truth. House Valeric stole the throne through murder. The vision shifted again. The dying Shadow Queen pressed blood-covered hands against the chest of the man who betrayed her, and with her final breath, she cursed the stolen bloodline. Not with death, with emptiness. Their wolves would slowly weaken generation after generation, until the sovereign bond returned. Ronan staggered backward as the vision ended. The dying wolf curse. It had never been illness. It had been consequence. The sanctuary fell silent again. Then suddenly, one of the council lords drew a hidden blade. "This changes nothing," he shouted desperately. Panic consumed him completely, because truth threatened power more than war ever could. If the Pax learn House Vaelric was illegitimate, the kingdom will collapse. Several frightened nobles immediately supported him. "The heirs must die now. The bond must end before the wolves abandon us." The guards hesitated, not because they agreed, because the wolves surrounding the sanctuary had risen. Growling, Ronan slowly turned toward the shouting nobles. Something terrifying had changed inside him since the mountain. Before, the king ruled through control. Now, he ruled through certainty. "The kingdom collapsed the moment we built it on lies," he said coldly. The council lord raised his blade toward Alara anyway. Ronan moved instantly, but Alara reached the man first. Not with violence, with power. Black silver fire wrapped around the noble's arm harmlessly. Then the man screamed, not in pain, in memory. Visions flooded him exactly as they had flooded the sanctuary. The betrayal, the murder, the curse, the truth. The blade slipped from his hand as he collapsed, sobbing onto the stone floor. The chamber fell silent again. Ilara stared down at her trembling fingers in shock. The power no longer destroyed blindly. It revealed. The old oracle smiled softly. The sovereign blood was never made for conquest. Her cloudy eyes lifted toward the court. It was made for truth. Fear shifted through the nobles instantly. Not fear of death, fear of exposure. Because every lie inside the sanctuary would now be seen clearly. The little boy suddenly reached tiny fingers toward Ronan. "Father." The single word shattered the tension instantly. Ronan froze. The infant smiled sleepily at him. Then, tiny, silver-black magic curled around the king's wrist gently. The dying remnants of the curse vanished completely. Everyone saw it happen. The Alpha King's wolf had been restored by his son. A murmur spread through the sanctuary. The heirs were not destroying the North. They were healing it. And suddenly, the political balance changed. First, several nobles slowly lowered themselves to one knee. Then more followed. Not before Ilara. Before the twins. Before the restored sovereign bond. The remaining council loyalists looked horrified. Because once fear cracked, devotion rushed into the empty space. Ronan saw it too. The kingdom was choosing. And that made Ilara more vulnerable than ever. Because people who worshipped could become just as dangerous as people who feared. The king stepped toward her carefully. "You do not owe them a throne," he said quietly. The words stunned the court. Because Ronan had finally understood something no king before him had. Ilara was not a weapon, not a political solution, not a sacred object. She was a woman forced to survive everyone else's hunger for power. Tears burned unexpectedly behind her eyes. The mate bond trembled warmly for the first time since the rejection. Not healed, completely, but no longer bleeding. Then suddenly, a scream echoed from above the sanctuary. Everyone looked upward sharply. Another followed. Then the sound of battle erupted through the palace overhead. Commander Thorne's voice roared faintly from somewhere beyond the staircase. "Protect the heirs." Panic slammed through the chamber instantly. Ronan's eyes turned lethal. What happened? A wounded guard stumbled down the stairs, covered in blood. "The Eastern Pax," he gasped. "They breached the palace gates." The sanctuary went still. The Eastern Pax were the oldest enemies of House Vaelric. If they seized the heirs now, the North would drown in civil war before dawn. And above them, the sounds of slaughter were getting closer. The first body fell down the sanctuary stairs seconds later. A royal guard, dead before he hit the floor. Blood streaked across the ancient stone steps while screams echoed through the palace above. Steel clashed violently overhead. Wolves roared. Glass shattered somewhere far above the sanctuary ceiling. The Eastern Pax had reached the inner palace. Panic erupted among the nobles immediately. They came for the heirs. The gates failed. "We need to flee. No one leaves this chamber." Ronan's voice cut through the chaos like a blade. The Alpha King stood motionless beneath the sanctuary moonlight, but rage rolled off him so heavily the wolves surrounding the thrones flattened their ears instinctively. Commander Thorn burst down the staircase moments later, with blood covering half his armor. "Your Majesty," he breathed harshly. The Eastern Alphas broke through the lower city after the bells rang. His pale eyes shifted briefly toward the twins. They're demanding the heirs be surrendered. Of course they were. The moment the old sovereign bond awakened, every rival power in the north would either try to control the children or kill them before another kingdom could. Ronan drew his sword slowly. How many? Thousands. Several nobles, visibly paled. The Eastern packs were not merely rivals. They were war clans raised on conquest, brutal wolves who spent generations waiting for weakness inside House Vaelric. If they captured the twins, they could unite the north beneath their own rule, using the sovereign bloodline as leverage. And the palace above them was already collapsing into violence. Another distant roar shook the sanctuary. Closer now. Alara tightened her hold protectively around the twins as fear crawled through her chest. Not fear for herself. For them. The little girl sensed it immediately. Tiny black fur spread across her arms, while silver eyes sharpened toward the staircase. A low growl rumbled from the infant. The wolves around the sanctuary answered instantly. Ronan noticed, then made a decision that stunned everyone present. He walked directly toward the eastern staircase, leading back into the palace. "Alone, Ilara," he said quietly without turning around. "Stay inside the sanctuary." Her pulse jumped instantly. "Ronan, the chamber recognizes your blood. They cannot breach it easily." His grip tightened around his sword. "But if the Eastern Alphas reach these stairs before I stop them, the entire kingdom dies tonight." The words settled heavily through the chamber, because everyone knew he spoke truth. If rival packs saw the heirs openly before the kingdom stabilized, war would consume the north for generations. Ilara stepped toward him anyway. "You can't fight thousands alone." Ronan finally turned. His golden eyes softened painfully when they found her. "I don't intend to." Then the Alpha King lifted his head toward the wolves surrounding the sanctuary and growled. The sound rolled through the underground chamber like thunder. Every wolf immediately rose. Ancient guardians, royal war beasts, pack wolves from every territory. Not divided, united. For the first time in centuries, the wolves answered one king together. The Eastern packs had come expecting civil war. Instead, they were about to face the entire north. Ronan looked toward Commander Thorn. "Seal every entrance except the northern gate." The commander understood instantly. "You're forcing them into the blood courtyard." Ronan's expression darkened. "Yes, the blood courtyard. The oldest battlefield inside Verhold, built specifically for alpha warfare. Narrow stone walls, limited exits, perfect for turning superior numbers into a slaughterhouse." Thorn's mouth tightened grimly. "Understood." The commander turned immediately, barking orders toward the remaining loyal guards. The sanctuary erupted into controlled chaos. Wolves surged toward the staircase. Soldiers prepared defenses. Nobles either fled behind pillars or dropped to their knees, praying desperately to gods that had remained silent for centuries. Through it all, Ronan moved toward the stairs leading into war. Alara caught his wrist before he could leave. The mate bond surged violently at the contact. Ronan froze instantly. Their eyes met beneath the sanctuary moonlight, and suddenly the chaos around them disappeared. Only this remained. Him. Here. The impossible fragile thing surviving between them despite everything they had done to each other. "You might not come back," she whispered. Ronan's expression changed. Not fear. Acceptance. "I know." Pain twisted sharply through her chest, because she finally understood what terrified her most. Not the throne, not the kingdom. Losing him, even after the rejection, even after the exile. The realization nearly broke her. Ronan lifted one trembling hand carefully against her cheek. "I should have chosen you sooner." Her breath shook. "Yes," she whispered honestly. A faint broken smile crossed his face. Then the little boy suddenly reached tiny hands toward his father from Alara's arms. Ronan stared at him. The infant blinked silver eyes sleepily, then touched the king's chest. Black silver light spread instantly through Ronan's body. Not explosive, gentle, protective. The sanctuary itself responded. Ancient runes ignited beneath the king's feet, while every wolf in the chamber lowered its head. The sovereign bond accepted him, not because of stolen blood. Choice. The old oracle smiled softly from beside the thrones. The heirs have recognized their king. The words stunned the chamber silent. Ronan looked shaken for the first time all night, because after everything, the children still chose him too. The little girl shifted fully into wolf cub form again, and climbed awkwardly onto Ronan's shoulder. The entire sanctuary watched in disbelief as the tiny black cub settled herself proudly against the Alpha King's neck, claiming him. The wolves howled instantly, a deep united sound that shook the ancient chamber. Ilara laughed softly through sudden tears. The tiny cub yawned sleepily toward the room, as if unaware she had just changed the political balance of the entire kingdom. Ronan carefully touched the small wolf, with stunned gentleness, then looked back at Ilara. Something inside both of them finally softened completely. Not healed, but no longer fighting survival alone. Another explosion thundered above the sanctuary. Closer. The eastern packs had reached the inner palace. Ronan's face hardened again immediately. Duty returned, but different now. Not cold. Protective. He leaned forward suddenly and pressed his forehead gently against Ilara's. The entire sanctuary froze, because the gesture was deeply intimate among wolves. Trust. Devotion. Apology. Promise. When this ends, Ronan murmured against her skin, I will spend the rest of my life earning back what I broke. The mate bond flared warm for the first time since the blood eclipse. Not shattered anymore. Healing. Then the king stepped away. The tiny wolf cub remained proudly perched on his shoulder, and together with the wolves of the north at his back, Alpha King Ronan Valric ascended toward war. The blood courtyard had already become a massacre by the time Ronan arrived. Bodies littered the black stone beneath falling snow. Eastern warriors clashed violently against palace guards while wolves tore through narrow corridors in savage bursts of blood and fur. At the center of the chaos stood the Eastern Alpha himself, Alpha Darius of House Mordain. Dull, massive, silver-haired, and brutal-eyed. The rival Alpha turned the moment Ronan entered the courtyard. Then his gaze locked immediately onto the tiny black wolf cub perched on the king's shoulder. Everything stopped. Not the battle. Darius himself. Shock crossed his face. Then awe. Then hunger. The air. He breathed. Ronan descended the staircase slowly into the blood-soaked courtyard. The wolves behind him spread outward through the palace, ruins like living shadows. Darius recovered quickly. You hide them beneath the palace while the north tears itself apart? The Eastern Alpha growled. The sovereign blood belongs to all packs. No, Ronan answered coldly. The cub on his shoulder growled softly. Every wolf present immediately lowered itself slightly. Even Eastern wolves. Darius saw it happen, and realization darkened his face. The bond had already spread too far. The heirs were influencing wolves outside House Valric territory now, which meant time was running out. The Eastern Alpha slowly drew his enormous axe. Then I'll take the children myself. Ronan's wolf exploded forward instantly. The transformation shattered stone beneath his feet. Black fur, golden eyes, teeth built for war. The tiny wolf cub remained perched calmly between his shoulders as though she belonged there. And across the blood courtyard, every wolf in the north chose a side. Then, war truly began. The clash between Ronan and Alpha Darius shook the palace like an earthquake. Steel screamed against claws. Black stone shattered beneath massive wolf bodies as the two alphas crashed through the blood courtyard with enough force to send soldiers scrambling backward in terror. But the Eastern warriors quickly realized something horrifying. Ronan was stronger than he had ever been before. Not merely healed, transformed. The sovereign bond flowing through the heirs had restored what generations of stolen blood weakened inside House Valric. Every strike from the king's monstrous black wolf carried impossible force. Golden eyes burned beneath the storm-dark sky, while blood steamed across the snow around him. And perched between his shoulders, the tiny black wolf cub watched the battle with glowing silver eyes. Every wolf present felt her, even enemies. The eastern wolves hesitated each time she growled softly. Their instincts warred against their orders. That hesitation was killing them. Darius noticed immediately. Rage twisted across the rival alpha's face as another eastern wolf abandoned formation rather than attack Ronan directly. "They're controlling the packs already," he roared. No, the heirs were not controlling them. The wolves were choosing willingly, and that frightened everyone. Darius shifted fully then. Bones cracked violently through the courtyard as silver fur erupted across his enormous body. He became a monstrous beast, nearly the size of a warhorse, scarred from decades of conquest with eyes cold as frozen steel. The eastern alpha lunged. Ronan met him head-on. The impact shattered pillars along the courtyard edge. Soldiers screamed and scattered while wolves tore into one another beneath falling snow. Above the chaos, the palace bells rang again, and deep beneath the city, Ilara felt every heartbeat of the war through the mate bond. The sanctuary had become a fortress. Commander Thorne stationed loyal guards throughout the underground chamber, while wolves guarded every entrance. The surviving nobles remained trapped between terror and awe beneath the ancient moonlight. No one knew what came next anymore. The old rules had already broken. Ilara stood beside the twin thrones, listening to the battle raging faintly overhead, while the children slept restlessly against her chest. Each time Ronan was wounded, she felt it. The bond pulsed sharply through her ribs. Not fatal, not yet, but dangerous. The little boy suddenly whimpered in his sleep. Silver-black magic curled around his tiny fingers. Then the sanctuary floor trembled. The old oracle looked sharply upward. "The bond is reacting to the battle." Ilara frowned. "What does that mean?" The ancient woman hesitated, then quietly answered the truth. The sovereign bond was never passive. Her cloudy eyes lifted toward the sleeping twins. The heirs strengthen the wolves they accept. Cold realization spread through the chamber. Ronan wasn't winning alone. The children were unconsciously feeding strength into him through the bond. And if he died, Ilara's stomach twisted violently. No. The little girl suddenly woke. Instantly, her silver eyes snapped open toward the sanctuary entrance. Then she growled. Every wolf in the chamber rose immediately. Commander Thorne drew his sword. Something's coming. A second later, the sanctuary doors exploded inward. Silver fire crashed through the entrance hard enough to throw guards across the floor. Screams erupted instantly. A figure stepped through the smoke, draped in white ceremonial robes stained with blood. High Priestess Selene, the old Moon Temple leader. Ilara recognized her immediately. The woman who ordered the eclipse judgment. The woman who placed silver ash against her skin while the court watched her break. But Selene no longer looked calm and composed. She looked desperate. Mud. Dozens of temple warriors flooded into the sanctuary behind her, wielding silver-bladed spears marked with sacred runes. The wolves snarled instantly. The priestess lifted glowing silver hands toward Ilara. The heirs must die before the sovereign bond fully awakens. Chaos erupted. Temple warriors charged forward. Wolves met them in a storm of claws and blood. Commander Thorne crashed into the first attackers while guards fought desperately to hold the sanctuary line. Selene walked directly through the violence without hesitation. Her eyes locked only onto the twins. "You don't understand what they are," she whispered. Ilara backed away instinctively. The ancient power beneath her skin stirred sharply. "Neither do you." The priestess's face twisted. "I know exactly what the sovereign bond becomes once it spreads." Silver light burned across her hands. Every wolf loses freedom. Every pack bends beneath one bloodline. It begins with peace and ends with obedience. The sanctuary trembled, because part of what she said was true. Ilara had already felt the wolves responding instinctively to the twins. The power frightened her too. Selene saw the hesitation cross her face, then pressed harder. "You think the old queens ruled through kindness?" the priestess hissed. "No ruler survives that long without becoming a cage." The words struck painfully, because Alara feared them, feared becoming another throne that consumed people in the name of protection. The twins stirred restlessly, and suddenly, the sanctuary showed her another vision. Not the past, the future. Alara gasped sharply. She saw wolves kneeling endlessly before her, saw entire packs obeying without question, saw fear slowly replacing love, saw herself becoming exactly what the council once feared. The vision shattered. Alara staggered backward, breathing hard. Celine stepped closer instantly. "Yes," the priestess whispered. "Now you understand." The sanctuary lights flickered violently. The sovereign bond responded to Alara's fear. The wolves throughout the chamber whined uneasily. And above the palace, Ronan suddenly felt the bond destabilize. The king staggered mid-battle. Darius immediately attacked harder. Claws ripped across Ronan's shoulder violently, sending blood across the snow-covered courtyard. The tiny wolf cub on his back cried out. The Eastern Alpha froze briefly in shock, because the sound hurt him too. Every wolf present felt it. The Heirs' distress rippled through the sovereign bond painfully. Darius stared around the battlefield, as Eastern wolves began backing away uncertainly. For the first time, he looked afraid of what he had started. Back inside the sanctuary, Celine slowly lowered her glowing hands. "You can end this peacefully," she said softly. The battle around them continued violently. Temple warriors fought wolves beneath the ancient thrones, while Commander Thorn struggled against 3 attackers at once. Yet the priestess cared only about Alara. "Give me the children," Celine whispered, "and I will sever the bond before it enslaves the North forever." The sanctuary fell silent. The twins looked up at their mother sleepily, trusting, innocent. Alara's heart shattered, because part of her still feared the power inside them. What if the priestess was right? What if love and protection slowly became control? What if one day the wolves stopped kneeling willingly? Celine stepped closer carefully. "You know what power does to kingdoms." Yes, Alara did. She had survived beneath powerful people her entire life. Kings, councils, priestesses, every one of them convinced they knew what was best for others. Tears burned her eyes. "I don't want them to become monsters." The priestess softened immediately, then saved them from becoming sovereigns. The little girl suddenly reached tiny fingers toward Alara's face, then softly touched her tears. A vision burst through Alara instantly. Not conquest, not obedience, choice. She saw wolves walking freely beside one another, saw packs ending blood feuds centuries old, saw Ronan laughing softly while teaching the twins to run through snow-covered forests, saw herself sitting beside, not above the throne, not ruling through fear, listening. The vision shifted one final time. She saw the future break into darkness, only if she ruled alone. But beside Ronan, the bond remained balanced, equal. The old sovereign system was never meant to place all power in one bloodline. It was meant to prevent kings from standing alone. The truth crashed through her completely. The Shadow Queens were never absolute rulers. They were balance against absolute rulers. Celine saw understanding change Alara's expression, and panic finally crossed the priestess's face. "No," she whispered. Alara slowly lifted her head. The ancient power around her steadied instantly. The sanctuary light calmed. The wolves stopped, trembling. "I know what truly frightens you now," Alara said softly. Celine backed away. "You fear losing control of the temple." The priestess's silence answered everything. The moon sanctuary itself reacted violently. Ancient runes ignited across the walls, because the chamber recognized truth. Celine screamed suddenly and hurled silver fire toward the twins. Alara moved instinctively. Black silver moonfire erupted from her body. The two powers collided violently above the sanctuary floor. The explosion shook the entire underground kingdom, and above the palace, every wolf in Virehold suddenly howled at once. The explosion beneath the sanctuary split the palace ceiling. Silver fire and black moonlight erupted upward through ancient stone in a violent column visible across all of Virehold. Citizens poured into the frozen streets, staring in horror as sacred temple bells shattered one by one above the city. And every wolf, every single wolf across the north, dropped to its knees. Not from force, recognition. The sovereign bond had fully awakened. Inside the sanctuary, power crashed through the chamber like a storm made of light. Temple warriors screamed as ancient runes flared across the walls. Wolves snarled. Stone pillars cracked apart beneath the collision between Celine's silver flame and Alara's black moonfire. At the center of the chaos stood Alara herself, changed, not transformed into something monstrous, into something complete. The black crescent mark beneath her ribs now glowed steadily beneath silver-black patterns spreading softly across her skin like living constellations. Her dark hair moved weightlessly around her, while moonlight bent unnaturally toward her body. And behind her, the gigantic spirit wolf rose again, larger now, stronger. Its silver eyes opened fully above the sanctuary, with ancient intelligence burning inside them. The high priestess stumbled backward in horror. "No," Celine whispered, "because the spirit wolf did not bow to Alara. It stood beside her, equal. The old queen's spirits were not possessions. They were guardians, companions." The truth shattered centuries of temple lies instantly. Alara looked toward the terrified priestess. "You knew," she said softly. Celine's breathing turned uneven. "You knew the sovereign bond was never slavery." The priestess's silence answered everything. Tears burned across Celine's face suddenly. "You don't understand what the old queens became," she screamed. The sanctuary trembled again. Memories burst from the ancient walls around them, not visions forced by magic. Truth awakened by the bond itself. The chamber showed them the final years before the first betrayal. The old Shadow Queen standing exhausted beneath endless petitions. Wolves begging her to solve every conflict, every famine, every war, every grief. The sovereign bond let rulers feel the suffering of entire kingdoms. And eventually, it crushed them beneath the weight of it. Celine's voice cracked painfully. She gave everything until there was nothing left of herself. The priestess pointed toward Alara desperately. "That throne consumes anyone kind enough to sit it." The vision shifted again. The first Shadow Queen weeping alone inside the sanctuary, while the Wolf King slept beside her, unaware she could barely carry the bond any longer. The old sovereign system had not failed because it was evil. It failed because one woman carried too much alone. Alara's breath shook. The realization hurt almost worse than betrayal. The first queen had not been murdered because she was cruel. She had been murdered because exhausted kingdoms fear women who become too powerful trying to save them. Ronan suddenly appeared at the sanctuary entrance covered in blood. The Alpha King looked terrifying. Battle wounds cut across his arms and chest, while black fur still partially covered his skin from incomplete shifting. Wolves flooded behind him through the broken staircase, forcing surviving Eastern warriors back toward the upper halls. But the moment Ronan saw Alara, he stopped moving entirely. The sanctuary fell silent around them, because the mate bond changed again, no longer fractured, no longer bleeding. Awake, Ronan felt everything. Her fear, her exhaustion, the unbearable weight of what the throne truly demanded. And Alara felt him too, the fury driving him through battle, the terror of losing her, the desperate determination to stand beside her no matter what the kingdom became afterward. The little twins reached toward their father immediately. Tiny silver-black light curled warmly through the air between them, and suddenly, the sanctuary revealed one final truth. The twin thrones ignited together, not separately, together. Ancient runes blazed across the floor while the spirit wolf behind Alara bowed its massive head toward Ronan too. The old oracle smiled softly through tears. At last, the court stared in stunned silence. The sovereign system was never meant to belong to one ruler. It required balance, shadow and crown, queen and king, compassion and strength. The old kingdom fell because betrayal shattered the balance completely. Celine looked horrified. No, because if Ronan and Alara ruled together willingly, the North would unite beneath them permanently. not through fear. Trust. The priestess raised trembling hands again desperately. You cannot rebuild this bond. It destroys those who carry it. Ronan moved toward Alara slowly. Not as king. Not as sovereign. As her mate. As the man who failed her and chose her anyway. When he spoke, his voice carried through the sanctuary with quiet certainty. Then she will never carry it alone. Silence. Absolute silence. The words struck deeper than any prophecy. Because that was the answer the old kingdom never found. The first Shadow Queen died isolated beneath impossible responsibility. Ilara would not. Ronan reached her at last. Blood covered his hands from battle. Snow melted slowly in his dark hair. His golden eyes looked wrecked by love and grief and devotion, all tangled together. I cannot erase what I did beneath the eclipse, he said softly before everyone. I cannot undo the fear I chose over you. Pain flickered through the mate bond. Shared now. Honest. But I will spend the rest of my life proving you never stand alone again. Tears blurred Alara's vision instantly. The sanctuary responded. Moonlight poured downward around both of them like falling stars, while the twin thrones pulsed warmly behind them. The old sovereign bond accepted them together. Celine stared in horror as the truth finally became undeniable. The kingdom had not awakened for conquest. It awakened for balance restored. The priestess's face twisted with despair. Then suddenly, she lunged toward the throne. Silver fire exploded violently from her body, straight toward the ancient runes beneath the sanctuary floor. If the bond survives, she screamed, the North will kneel forever. She intended to destroy the chamber itself. The sanctuary reacted instantly. Ancient wolves surged forward. Guards shouted. Ronan moved, but Alara reached Celine first. Not with violence, with truth. Black moonlight wrapped gently around the priestess instead of burning her. The sanctuary flooded Celine's mind completely, with every memory hidden beneath the old lies. The first queens, laughing beside their wolf kings. Packs choosing unity willingly. Children growing without war. The sovereign bond used for healing, not control. And finally, the first betrayal. Fearful men convincing themselves murder was necessary, because they could not bear a power they did not control. Celine collapsed, sobbing onto the sanctuary floor. The silver fire vanished, because beneath all her fanaticism, she had truly believed she was protecting the North. Ilara looked down at her quietly. The bond only becomes a cage when rulers forget wolves deserve choice. The priestess wept harder, not defeated, broken open by truth. The little girl suddenly yawned loudly from Ilara's arms. The sound shattered the unbearable tension instantly. Several wolves blinked in confusion. Then, the tiny cub shifted halfway again, soft black ears appearing through dark curls as she glared sleepily around the sanctuary. Ronan laughed, a real laugh, small and rough, and startled out of him before he could stop it. Everyone froze, because the Alpha King had not sounded human like that in years. Ilara stared at him in shock. Then, unexpectedly, she laughed too, softly, through tears, and something inside the sanctuary changed forever. The old chamber, once buried beneath blood and lies and betrayal, filled suddenly with something warm. Not fear, not worship, hope. The wolves relaxed first. Then the guards, even some nobles, slowly lowered their weapons. The kingdom had spent centuries believing power only survived through terror. Now they stood watching a queen who healed instead of conquered, and a king willing to kneel instead of control. The bond spread through the sanctuary gently, not forcing submission, inviting trust. The little boy blinked silver eyes sleepily around the chamber, then pointed toward the broken ceiling far above them. Snow. Everyone looked upward. Beyond the shattered palace roof, soft winter snow had finally begun falling peacefully over Verhold again. No blood eclipse. No storm. Just winter. The war above had ended. The wolves had stopped fighting, and somewhere beyond the sanctuary walls, the kingdom waited to see what kind of rulers would emerge from beneath the ruins of the old one. The twins, slowly drifted back asleep in Alara's arms. Ronan carefully brushed one trembling hand against their tiny heads, then looked at Alara, not with fear anymore, not even awe. Love. Simple. Certain. Earned through pain neither of them would ever fully forget. The old oracle smiled faintly beside the twin thrones. The North remembers itself again, and for the first time in centuries, no wolf disagreed. By morning, the entire kingdom knew. Not rumors, not whispers. Truth. The blood eclipse ended. The Eastern Pact surrendered. The moon sanctuary awakened. And beneath the palace of Verhold, the lost sovereign bond returned to the North. No one knew exactly what would happen next. That frightened everyone. But for the first time in generations, fear no longer belonged only to the powerless. The nobles feared losing control. The council feared exposure. The rival alphas feared irrelevance. And deep inside the palace, Alara feared becoming the kind of ruler who forgot how it felt to kneel bleeding on cold stone while powerful people decided whether her children deserved to live. She swore silently she never would. The sanctuary remained guarded for 3 days after the battle, not because enemies still threatened the heirs, because the kingdom could not decide what the heirs truly were. Every hour brought new delegations into Verhold, northern alphas, temple survivors, pack elders, war commanders. Some arrived to pledge loyalty. Others came to measure danger with their own eyes. No one left unchanged. The wolves reacted to the twins instinctively. Always. Proud war beasts lowered themselves quietly beside the infants without command. Rival pack wolves who once tried killing one another shared space peacefully inside the sanctuary. Injured soldiers recovered faster near the heirs. And most unsettling of all, the sovereign bond spread through emotion. When the twins laughed, wolves calmed. When they cried, wolves became restless. The kingdom felt them already. That power terrified Alara more each day. She stood alone beside the underground river beneath the sanctuary on the 4th night, unable to sleep while moonlight reflected softly across black water. You think they would be safer without you? Ronan's voice came quietly from behind her. Alara did not turn immediately. The mate bond had become different since the sanctuary awakened. Before, she felt his emotions like storms crashing through walls. Now, she sensed him gently. Warmth, exhaustion, concern, love. It still startled her, every time. You read me too easily now, she whispered. Ronan stepped beside her beneath the silver light. Only because I carry the same fear. Alara finally looked at him. The king appeared changed even outside the bond. Lighter somehow. The constant strain that once hollowed his eyes had eased since the curse vanished from his blood. Yet the battle scars across his skin remained fresh, and she noticed how often he still watched the sanctuary entrances whenever the twins slept. Still protecting. Always protecting now. The North expects answers, she said softly. Ronan leaned against the stone railing beside her. The North expects certainty. And you? His gaze shifted toward the underground river. I expect men to fear what they cannot control. Bitterness roughened his voice. History rarely changes as quickly as magic. Alara looked down at her reflection trembling through dark water. The black crescent mark beneath her collarbone glowed faintly now even in darkness. Visible. Impossible to hide anymore. I don't want them worshipping the twins. Ronan answered immediately. Neither do I. Silence stretched gently between them. Then Alara whispered the fear she had not spoken aloud yet. What if Celine was partly right? Ronan turned toward her fully. What if the bond changes people slowly? She continued quietly. What if wolves stop choosing freely once it spreads too deeply? The king studied her carefully, not dismissing, listening. That mattered more than she expected. Finally he spoke. My father taught me power survives by forcing loyalty. His expression darkened. But the moment the curse broke inside my wolf, I realized something. Alara waited. Ronan's eyes softened painfully. I had forgotten what freedom felt like too. The truth of it settled heavily between them. House Vaelric had ruled so long through fear that even its kings became trapped inside it. The sovereign bond did not weaken wolves. Fear did. Ilara exhaled slowly. Then, suddenly, the twins began crying somewhere deeper in the sanctuary. Not distressed. Demanding. Ronan sighed immediately. They've learned timing. Despite herself, Ilara smiled faintly. Together they returned toward the inner sanctuary chambers, where the twins slept beneath heavy black furs beside the ancient thrones. Commander Thorn waited outside the chamber doors. The commander bowed slightly. The Western Pack Alphas arrived. Ronan's expression hardened instantly. The Western Packs. The oldest military alliance outside House Velric control. Dangerous, proud, and deeply suspicious of the sovereign bond awakening again. Ilara felt tension return through the mate bond immediately. Do they come peacefully? She asked. Thorn hesitated. They come carefully. That meant no. The commander opened the sanctuary doors slowly. 3 Western Alpha Lords waited inside, surrounded by tense guards and restless wolves. Massive men scarred by war and winter, each carrying enough authority to destabilize entire regions of the north. Yet all 3 looked unsettled the moment Ilara entered holding the twins. Not because of her, because their wolves instantly lowered themselves. The Western Alphas noticed, and hated it. The eldest stepped forward first. Alpha, Garrick, gray-haired, one-eyed, coldly intelligent. We came for truth, he said. Ronan remained beside Ilara, but did not interrupt. Good. The old king would have spoken for her. The new one watched beside her. Instead, Garrick's gaze settled on the twins. The sovereign bond already affects wolves beyond your territory. Ilara nodded carefully. We know. And if the heirs command war tomorrow? The sanctuary quieted completely. The question mattered. Not politically, morally. Ilara looked down at the twins sleeping peacefully against her chest, then answered honestly. They won't. The Western Alpha's expression hardened. Every ruler claims restraint before power settles fully into their hands. Fair. Painfully fair. Before Ilara could answer, the little girl suddenly woke and blinked sleepy silver eyes toward Garrick. Then, the infant reached tiny fingers toward the old Alpha. Everyone froze. Slowly, cautiously, Garrick stepped closer. The baby touched his scarred hand, and the massive Western Alpha staggered backward in shock. Tears filled his remaining eye instantly. Ronan frowned sharply. What did she do? Garrick stared at the child like a man struck through the chest. My wolf, he whispered. The old Alpha's voice broke. She showed me my son. Silence. The sanctuary itself seemed to soften around them. Everyone knew Garrick's only child died during border wars 20 years earlier. The old Alpha swallowed hard. She didn't force anything. His rough voice trembled faintly. She only let him say goodbye. The entire chamber changed after that. Not politically, emotionally. The Western Alphas no longer looked at the twins like weapons. They looked at them like something sacred and terrifying and heartbreakingly gentle all at once. The little girl yawned sleepily and immediately fell back asleep, as though healing ancient griefs exhausted her. Garrick slowly lowered himself onto one knee. Not before the throne, before the child. The other Western Alphas followed. Ronan watched silently beside Ilara, then quietly murmured near her ear, They're choosing you. Ilara's chest tightened painfully. No, she whispered back. They're choosing hope. And perhaps that frightened her most of all, because hope made people reckless. The sanctuary door suddenly burst open. A wounded palace guard stumbled inside, breathless. Your Majesty. Blood covered the young soldier's armor. Ronan moved instantly. What happened? The guard swallowed hard. The southern districts are rioting. Fear spread sharply through the chamber. The soldier looked toward Ilara nervously. Citizens are demanding the heirs be shown publicly. His voice shook. Others are calling them abominations. He hesitated. The city is splitting apart. Of course it was. Truth had reached the kingdom faster than trust ever could. The Western Alphas exchanged grim looks. Commander Thorn cursed softly beneath his breath. Then the guard whispered the part that chilled the sanctuary completely. Someone tried to burn the lower moon temple an hour ago. The twins stirred immediately. The little boy's silver eyes opened slowly. Then softly, almost sadly, he whispered one word. Afraid. The sanctuary fell silent again. Because the child was right. The kingdom was not breaking because of hatred. It was breaking because terrified people did not yet know whether the sovereign bond would save them or consume them. Ronan slowly looked toward Alara, toward the woman once dragged through this kingdom in chains, and quietly asked the question that would decide everything next. Are you ready for them to see you? Alara's heart began pounding instantly, because she understood exactly what he meant. Not hidden beneath sanctuary walls, not whispered about in fear, publicly, before the entire kingdom. The same kingdom that once watched her break beneath the blood eclipse, now waiting to see whether the woman they condemned would return as queen, or conqueror. The twins looked up at her silently, trusting her completely. And somewhere beyond the sanctuary, the wolves of Verhold were already gathering, waiting. The wolves gathered before sunset. Thousands of them. They filled the streets of Verhold in eerie silence beneath falling snow, while citizens crowded rooftops, windows, balconies, and frozen market squares waiting for the palace gates to open. No one ordered the gathering. That frightened the nobles most. The wolves came because they wanted to. Some belonged to royal guards, others to rival packs. Many were wild northern beasts no human had ever successfully tamed. Yet all of them faced the palace the same way, waiting, watching, expecting. The kingdom held its breath. Inside the sanctuary, servants dressed Alara in silence. Not queen silks, not ceremonial jewels. She refused both. Instead, she wore a gown of deep black, woven with silver thread that moved like moonlight across dark water. The crescent mark beneath her collarbone remained visible deliberately. No hiding, no pretending. The same mark the kingdom once called cursed now glowed softly against her skin, while the twins slept wrapped in black furs beside the ancient throne. Ronan watched from across the sanctuary chamber without speaking for a long time. Alara felt his attention constantly through the mate bond. Not possessive, almost disbelieving. Finally she looked up. What? The king exhaled softly. You stopped looking afraid. The words startled her, because he was right. Not fearless, never fearless. But something fundamental inside her had changed since the mountain. The kingdom no longer frightened her more than losing herself did. Alara adjusted the twins carefully in her arms. I'm still afraid. Ronan stepped closer slowly. Good, he said quietly. She frowned faintly. The king's golden eyes softened. Cruel rulers stop fearing themselves eventually. The honesty of the answer settled deeply inside her chest. No throne had ever taught Ronan gentleness. Pain had. Regret had. Love had. Commander Thorn entered moments later dressed in full black armor. The city is ready. No, the city was waiting. There was a difference. The sanctuary doors opened slowly behind them. Cold winter air swept downward through the ancient chamber, carrying distant wolf howls from the streets above. Alara's pulse quickened instantly. Ronan sensed it. Without hesitation, he stepped beside her. Not ahead, beside. A small thing, a powerful thing. Then, together, they ascended back toward the palace. The throne hall looked exactly the same as the night Alara was rejected. That nearly destroyed her. The towering black banners, the frost-covered marble, the silver braziers burning beside the throne. For one terrible heartbeat, she could still hear the court laughing, while she knelt bleeding beneath the blood eclipse. The memory hit so hard she stopped walking. Ronan noticed immediately. The mate bond tightened sharply. Boin. Humiliation. Fear. All the emotions she tried burying beneath survival flooded back through the hall at once. The king turned toward her slowly, and before the entire gathered court, Ronan removed his crown. Silence crashed across the throne room instantly. No king removed the crown publicly, not willingly. Ronan descended the throne steps until he stood directly before her beneath the same ceiling where he once rejected her. His voice carried through the hall quietly. This court watched me fail you. No one breathed. The nobles looked horrified already, because the king was not protecting himself. He was exposing himself willingly. Ronan's eyes never left Ilara's. I let fear speak louder than love. His jaw tightened painfully. I let a throne matter more than the woman carrying my children. The words struck the hall harder than shouting ever could. Several nobles lowered their heads immediately. Others looked deeply uncomfortable. Good. Let them feel it. Ronan slowly lowered himself to one knee before her. The entire throne room gasped, because this was not symbolic, not political. The Alpha King bowed willingly before the woman he once humiliated publicly. "You should have returned to this hall as queen the first time," he said hoarsely. "Not prisoner, not exile." Ilara's vision blurred instantly. The mate bond shook violently between them, not from magic. Emotion. Real. Rough. Painfully human. Ronan lifted the royal crown slowly in both hands and offered it to her, not placing it on her head. Offering. Choice again. The court stared in stunned silence, because for the first time in living memory, a king asked instead of claimed. Ilara looked down at the crown, then at the twins sleeping quietly in her arms, and finally at Ronan kneeling before her beneath the same throne room where he broke both their hearts. The old version of herself might have taken the crown to prove something, to punish, to reclaim dignity through power. But that woman died in the snow beneath the blood eclipse. Slowly, Ilara reached out, not for the crown, for Ronan's hand. The king looked stunned when she pulled him back to his feet beside her. Whispers spread instantly through the court. Ilara turned toward the gathered nobles, guards, and wolves, filling the hall beyond the open palace doors. Then she spoke clearly enough for the entire kingdom waiting outside to hear. "I will not rule above wolves who fear me." Silence. Absolute silence. Ilara's voice strengthened. This kingdom spent centuries kneeling beneath crowns built through fear. Her eyes swept across the hall. "I know what fear does to people. I survived it." Several nobles looked away immediately. The memory of her rejection still haunted the room. Good. It should. Ilara held the twins closer. "These children will not become weapons for kings, councils, or temples." Her gaze sharpened. "And I will not become another ruler, demanding obedience while calling it peace." The wolves throughout the city remained utterly silent, listening. Ronan watched her like a man witnessing history rewrite itself in real time. Ilara slowly looked toward the open palace doors, where thousands waited beyond the snow-covered courtyard. "You do not belong to me," she said softly. The sovereign bond pulsed through the kingdom. Varm. Gentle. Listening. The wolves raised their heads, and for the first time, no force pushed against them, only choice. Some still knelt. Others rose slowly to their feet. Free. The bond accepted both. A ripple moved through the city instantly. People began crying openly in the streets, not from fear, relief. The old oracle standing near the throne smiled through tears. The bond finally remembers what it was made for. Hope spread through the palace like dawn, breaking after endless winter. Not everyone accepted it. One noble suddenly stepped forward angrily. "And what prevents future sovereigns from abusing this power?" Faire question. Necessary question. The hall waited. Ilara answered without hesitation. "The same thing that prevents kings from becoming monsters." The noble scoffed bitterly. "And what is that?" Ronan spoke before she could. "Each other." The court fell silent again, because everyone understood the meaning beneath the words. Balance. Not one ruler above all. Not isolated power. Partnership. The little girl suddenly woke and stretched sleepily in Ilara's arms. Then the tiny cub shifted halfway and looked directly toward the open palace doors. A soft howl escaped her. Every wolf across Verhold answered instantly. Not. Submission. Belonging. The sound rolled through the city like thunder, breaking centuries of loneliness apart. Ilara felt tears finally spilled down her face. Not because she became queen, because the kingdom no longer looked at her like something cursed. For the first time in her life, the North looked at her and saw home. Ronan gently brushed away one tear with his thumb. The tenderness nearly broke her heart completely. "You survived them," he whispered softly. Alara looked out across the kingdom waiting beyond the palace, then quietly answered, "No." Her fingers tightened around his hand. "We survived them." The wolves howled again beneath falling snow, and throughout Verhold, people began lowering their weapons. Not because they were ordered to, because they finally believed the war might truly end. The twins drifted peacefully back to sleep. The palace bells rang softly through the winter evening, and for the first time in 500 years, the throne room no longer felt cold. Winter softened slowly after that night. Not suddenly, not magically. The North had survived too many wars to trust peace immediately. But something fundamental changed inside Verhold after the wolves chose freely before the palace gates. The riots stopped first. Then, the executions. Then the old laws branding shadow-marked children as cursed quietly disappeared from royal records one by one. The kingdom did not heal overnight. Healing never works that way. But for the first time in centuries, it began. The twin thrones were moved from the buried sanctuary into the rebuilt palace hall 3 weeks later. Not raised above the kingdom, placed level with the court. That alone caused outrage among older nobles. Ronan ignored them. The king had become terrifyingly difficult to manipulate after the blood eclipse. Not colder. Worse for them. Certain. The council fractured completely within days. Several lords fled the capital. Others publicly confessed involvement in the lies surrounding the sovereign bloodline, hoping mercy might spare their houses. Alara granted mercy more often than the court expected. That unsettled people too. Cruelty was easier to understand than compassion, especially from someone who suffered publicly. Yet she refused to build her rule on revenge, because she remembered too clearly what it felt like standing powerless before people convinced cruelty protected the kingdom. Some nights that memory still woke her shaking. The rejection beneath the eclipse remained inside her like broken glass buried under skin. Ronan knew. The mate bond carried her nightmares to him now. Every time she woke gasping from dreams of silver chains and blood-red moonlight, the king pulled her against his chest without words, until her breathing steadied again. He never once asked forgiveness. He understood some wounds survived love. That mattered. More than promises ever could. The twins grew frighteningly fast. Not physically, spiritually. By their 3rd month, wolves throughout the palace already responded to their emotions instinctively. When the little girl laughed, anxious wolves calmed. When the boy cried, storms gathered above the city. The kingdom adored them. That frightened Alara constantly. She refused to let the heirs become symbols people worshipped blindly. So she carried them herself through markets, through villages, through the lower city kitchens where servants still dropped spoons whenever the queen entered. The first time Alara returned to the royal kitchens after the eclipse, silence consumed the room instantly. The same place where she once scrubbed blood from stone floors. The same place where noble women once refused eating food touched by her hands. Now servants stared at her like something sacred. Alara hated it immediately. So she picked up a knife, sat beside the kitchen girls preparing winter vegetables, and started helping. The servants nearly fainted. One old woman finally burst into tears. "You shouldn't be working beside us anymore." Alara looked up softly. "Why?" The woman stared helplessly. "Because you're queen." No, that was exactly why she should. The twins babbled happily beside baskets of bread, while cooks slowly relaxed around them. Wolves wandered through the kitchens without growling at anyone. Laughter returned to the lower halls for the first time in years. And somewhere deep inside the palace, the old ghosts began loosening their grip. Not everyone accepted the new kingdom quietly. 3 months after the blood eclipse, rebellion finally arrived. House Mordain, the Eastern Pax. Alpha Darius survived the battle at Verhold and fled north with loyal warriors refusing the sovereign bond entirely. He declared Ronan weak, declared Alara a manipulator, corrupting wolves through forbidden magic, declared the heirs abominations that would enslave the North. Thousands followed him. Fear still held power. The rebellion spread fast, through isolated territories already distrustful of Verhold. Ronan prepared for war immediately. Ilara prepared for something else. Talk to him? The king asked in disbelief. Inside the war chamber, commanders argued loudly around maps stained with ink and blood, while snow hammered against palace windows. He wants the twins dead. Ilara adjusted the sleeping boy against her shoulder. No, he wants control back. Ronan's expression darkened. Some men would rather burn kingdoms than lose power over them. Yes, she knew. The council taught her that lesson already. Ilara looked toward the storm beyond the windows. And if we answer fear with slaughter, the sovereign bond becomes exactly what they accuse it of being. Silence spread slowly through the chamber. The commanders hated that she was right. Ronan hated it too, because war would be easier. Finally, the king exhaled sharply. Darius won't negotiate publicly. Then I'll meet him privately. Absolutely not. The answer exploded through the mate bond, before Ronan even spoke aloud. Ilara almost smiled faintly. You can't stop me from going. His golden eyes flashed dangerously. Watch me. Several commanders quietly fled the room immediately. Smart men. Ilara waited until the doors closed before speaking again. You promised I would never stand alone. Her voice softened. Not that I would never stand at all. That hit him hard. Ronan turned away toward the storm. The bond carried his fear clearly. Not of battle. Losing her. Again. Finally, he muttered bitterly. You argue unfairly. Yes. Silence stretched. Then slowly. The king nodded once, but only after placing 3 entire battalions secretly around the meeting site anyway. The meeting happened beneath the burned ruins of an old border fortress 3 nights later. Snow buried the broken stone walls while wolves watched from the forests surrounding the clearing. Darius arrived alone. So did Ilara. Mostly. Ronan remained hidden nearby with enough warriors to start another war if necessary. The Eastern Alpha stepped from the shadows looking older than before, tired, anglia, but also strangely hollow. His silver eyes fixed immediately on the twins sleeping inside Ilara's fur-lined cloak. You actually brought them. They belong to this kingdom too. Darius laughed harshly. That kingdom murdered its own truth for centuries. Fea. Ilara did not deny it. The Eastern Alpha studied her carefully beneath the snowfall. You really believe wolves will remain free beneath your bond? The question mattered, because he truly wanted the answer. Ilara looked down at the sleeping twins, then back toward the hardened warlord before her. I believe frightened rulers create frightened kingdoms. Darius's jaw tightened. And what happens when your children become strong enough to command every wolf alive? Ilara answered honestly. I don't know. The Alpha looked startled. Good. Truth should surprise powerful men more often. The little girl suddenly woke and blinked sleepy silver eyes toward Darius. The enormous warlord froze instantly, because the child looked at him without fear, only curiosity. Then slowly, the tiny girl reached one hand toward him. Darius stared at it like a blade pointed at his throat. Ilara. Ronan's voice growled dangerously through the trees. The king had finally lost patience, but Darius ignored him completely. Slowly, almost unwillingly, the Eastern Alpha stepped closer, then allowed the tiny heir to touch his scarred hand. The world went silent. Darius stopped breathing. A vision flooded him instantly. He saw himself younger, before endless wars, before ambition hardened into survival. He saw the brother he lost during border raids, saw wolves from rival packs laughing together before politics taught them hatred. And finally, he saw the future. Not chains, not conquest. His own pack children running safely beside wolves that no longer feared neighboring territories. The vision shattered. Darius staggered backward, breathing hard. Tears burned suddenly in his silver eyes. The warlord looked furious about them. What did she do to me? Ilara's voice softened. She reminded you who you were before fear became your kingdom. Silence. Snow drifted gently through the ruined fortress. Then, slowly, Alpha Darius lowered himself onto one knee. Not before Ilara. before the future he finally believed might exist. The rebellion ended that night, not through slaughter, choice, and throughout the north, the wolves howled in relief. Spring arrived, 6 months after the blood eclipse. Flowers finally bloomed through the frozen palace gardens where blood once stained the snow. The sanctuary beneath Verhold became a place wolves and humans visited together freely, not worshipping, remembering. Ronan changed too. The kingdom noticed first. The Alpha King smiled now, rarely, but real. He listened before punishing. Walked the lower city without guards sometimes, sat beside common soldiers during winter feasts. People trusted him differently, not because they feared him less, because they finally believed he feared becoming cruel more. And Ilara, the kingdom stopped calling her Shadow Queen eventually, not because the title disappeared, because another name replaced it naturally. The queen who returned, not from death, from humiliation, from exile, from surviving what should have broken her. 1 year after the blood eclipse, the kingdom gathered again beneath winter moonlight, inside the rebuilt throne hall. Not for judgment, for renewal. The twins older now, laughing loudly while tiny black wolf tails occasionally appeared behind ceremonial robes, ran between wolves and nobles without fear. The entire court laughed when the little girl stole Ronan's crown and placed it upside down on a palace hound. Even the king laughed helplessly while chasing her through the hall. Ilara watched from beside the twin thrones, smiling softly. Peace still felt fragile sometimes, but real. Ronan returned to her moments later, carrying their daughter beneath one arm, while the little boy clung sleepily to his shoulder. "You're enjoying my suffering too much." Ilara raised one brow. "You survived battlefields. Defeat by toddlers is humbling." The king kissed her anyway, slowly, warmly, without fear anymore. The court looked away respectfully. The wolves did not. The little girl suddenly pointed toward the great palace windows. Snow had started falling again across Verhold. Soft, peaceful, beautiful. Ronan wrapped one arm around Ilara's waist, while their children laughed between them. And for the first time in 500 years, the throne of the North no longer stood on fear. It stood on choice, on truth, on the love of a king who finally learned kneeling did not make him weak, and a woman who survived becoming powerful without losing her heart. Above them, the palace bells rang softly through the winter night. Not warning, not mourning, remembering. The kingdom of wolves had found itself again.